Dean Martin and Barry Como waft from the radio while the soda shop down the street beckons you to hit it up with your new sports car. It's 1953 and life is good for gearheads, but this won't be any old waltz down Main Street. This will be engines roaring and tires squealing as we get ready to watch round one of the Carrera Mundial, the 3-hour Tasman special. You'll see it all live here on the Global Sim Racing channel. I'm Joe Peak, and with me in the booth is Jake Sperry. And behind the scenes is our director, Daniel Costello. Jake, I'm looking forward to this one. You know I love these vintage cars, and honestly, a track like this is new to me. So I love getting to explore these sort of new territories.
Look, this back in the day, and when we talk back in the day, we're talking about 70 years ago now, was a who's who circuit for the who's who racing drivers at the time. You're talking Graham Hill, Jim Clark, Jack Brabham. All of those drivers loved racing here on this Longford circuit in Tasmania. And the reason why is that this would basically be your sighter to go out there and race and to get an understanding of what pace have you got for the season. It kept the drivers in check. It's not like what we've got here in the 21st century where you can run on a simulator any day, any time. No, you had to actually go out and organise races, and being the other side of the country where it's pretty much, or other side of the world where it's wet and windy and cold in winter, if you've got a bit of summer in Tasmania, you've got every ability to go out there and race. That's what makes this Longford circuit so important, and that's why I am loving Carrera Mundial and what it's going to bring today on the plate.
Indeed, as you can see, we start down here in New Zealand. Then we head over to Belfast for round two at Dundrod. And of course, 6 hours du Grand, that is a French countryside track. And then we head off to Spa for round four. And then finally, I love this, Monte Carlo 1966. Oh, that is going to be so awesome for round five. Short season, but really stacked with incredible circuits, including this one. It's going to look simple, but it is anything but, especially the start of the race with the viaduct here, Jake.
Well, it is the marquee corner on this circuit. They drive underneath a railway bridge, and so as such, the viaduct turn is a very important left-right chicane to get correct, which breaks up that run from Mountford Corner over to Longford Corner. And then, of course, you've got great overtaking opportunities. I think the Tannery Straight over to Tannery Corner is going to be one of the most important ones to get right. And that flying mile over to Mountford Corner, watch out for that late on in the race, because it's that sharp finish to the lap where along this 4.5 mile circuit is where we're going to see probably the key moves being made today. And those who can get a good start over 3 hours have a great chance of keeping themselves in the running over the course of this 3 hours. But overtaking around this track should come at a plenty.
Yeah, it's all about trying to get that straight line speed around here, getting off those corner exits. It's a long circuit, but only 9 corners means that we're going to be seeing about just over 2 minutes per lap. They're in the last of the warm-up, and they're going to be heading off to the race shortly here. And looking forward to seeing how the drivers manage this very tricky track. Not only heads under that railroad bridge, but then go over the tracks a little bit later. They cross over a river twice, and those are very narrow portions of this lap as well. This is a street circuit, and there you can see right there just how little room you have on either side.
Well, this is the key of the old street circuits, is that you are literally right up against the barriers. Safety? What safety? A track like this definitely wouldn't exist in modern times. And when you're trying to get yourself through all of these corners, you've got the brewery beer over down there on the inside. So if you do break down, you've got a nice place to stop for some of these drivers out there over the course of these laps. But this is pretty much as authentic of a classic feel circuit as you're going to get. These drivers have long straights, heavy long braking zones to deal with, and danger is fraught at every single corner, which means that you can't switch off in a race like this, whereas maybe you could say for modern circuits and modern challenges, Joe, that's maybe a little bit more likely to happen, is that you can get the circuit down pat and you can switch off. Not here when you're driving at 150 miles an hour plus and you're looking around left and right and you might be in a tree.
Exactly. As we go through today's starting grid, Prodan going to be leading Brown with Kirsten and McGregor completing your first 2 rows. And these are all going to be classic cars of various types out here with different physics. Salmonen leads Caralanti with Bergier and Bayer, then your next two for row 4 of today's race. About 29 cars or thereabouts. Celadon starts in 9th, Gardner P10 with Kondrasky in 11th. After that, it'll be Vorman starting in 12th in a Scuderia Favero car. Then it is Dolan starting 13th, Robillard P14. Ryan will begin in the 15th position, and the Finn Kantonen starting in the 16th spot. After that, Fleur will be P17, Matt Wright P18, and Birchfield in 19th position. Estrella will round out your top 20. From there, we've got Shepard starting 21st, Schrapp in the 22nd spot, Schmidt P23 to Burzy will be in the 24th position in the Mazzanti Ingeniera. And last couple cars, Gordon starts 25th, Herman's 26th, Santowski in 27th, and Ferry at the end. Start is ready to go, and there's the green flag. Drivers are off on their way. Very little grip in these machines. Got to get that start right, and they'll head towards that nefarious chicane to start things out under the viaduct. So far looking good for Prodan, holding on to the lead at the start. You can see just how long of a straight it is as they dip down, and now comes that difficult entry here, Jake.
Yeah, they've got to be right up on the brakes into the viaduct. They're 90-degree corners, but ultimately you don't have much grip in the tyres, so you're going to be sliding about looking for an opportunity. The track does narrow down a little bit as well as they run over the bridge and then over towards then the Longford corner, which is the closest corner, of course, to Longford village itself, and then making that charge. Longford, of course, a name that is derived from Irish, and you're seeing how close it is there in the middle as the likes of Maddie Shepherd tries to get her way to make a move in this one. You can sense that the middle of the pack does not want to be strung out too early, but that is the nature of this track. You will get it strung out early, and then you've got to really make some challenges, then use that slipstream, and too wide, too deep we find over the railway crossing.
Now they start to unleash the power, heading down Tannery straight. Lots of little hops in this one as the cars will get quite light over there. Now braking into Tannery Corner. Looks like a simple right-hand 90-degree turn, but you can see there's a little bit of a kink on the way in, trying to get that throttle down. Worth noting that Prodan lost the lead there heading into the viaduct. Brown has gotten ahead of him, and looks like he's already pulled about a second.
Yep, so 1.4 seconds, and looking to extend that gap early, and we could see a number of different ways that can happen over the course as we see McGregor off the road and into the verge there on the left-hand side, very much dropping 3, 4, 5 places from 3rd position down now into 8th is Scuderia Favero. Not looking very happy with the fact that that's just happened to him, and there in the white number 5 machine. He's got work to do to get there, but there goes Donat Prodan, who is hoping to gain that lead back, and he was a 1.4 seconds back heading onto the flying mile, and by the end of the flying mile, you know what? He's going to take the race lead if he's good enough on the brakes at Mountford Corner.
Question is he? This is the slowest turn on the track, and no, he's going to allow Brown to hold on to it, tries to cut back on him and get that one back. Beautifully executed, outguns him off the corner, and the red number 17 is back, or excuse me, number 8 is back into the lead.
Yeah, but not just yet, because remember, Brown's going to pick up the run now on the straight and really look to attack heading towards the viaduct. The track does feign over towards the right, and oh my word, he is certainly trying to get as much as he can pace-wise, and they can see the lean of the car hitting the brakes. They have to really slow it down through that small kink right, which leads into the viaduct left and right, and these drivers are going to be pretty much on the limits out here. You can sense that everywhere you look, these drivers are thinking about what can we do in the early stages of this race to keep ourselves out of trouble. There is Neil Senkowski in the Briswell Aviation car, hoping to make some good progress, then heading his way down into the opening section, Joe. And the middle of the pack already would be about 15 seconds adrift here off of your race leaders, which shows in an endurance sense like this, it is so easy to drop that time, and it's so difficult to bring it back up again.
Santowski racing in the S2000 class. We got a couple different classes out here in this series, the S3000 plus, S3000, and we've got S2000 like we were watching, and S1500 to round it out. But it's 3 hours, as you mentioned. It's an endurance race, so it will likely get quite mixed up, especially with how tricky these cars are to run, as the 5 is going to sneak inside. Bergier behind them giving watch in the 15. They're going to go side by side once again, coming down, looks like through Tannery Strait. Nope, maybe not. This is heading through Longbridge.
Yeah, so this is going to be Longbridge Corner, which is named as such. Quite aptly, I would say, Joe, because it's got a long bridge. So quite nicely named. It's quite simple. There's Newry Corner. They've just run up through, and this is where you set up the run for the flying mile now, up over the crest of the hill, and then you're dropping back down. So Ross McGregor trying to recover his way back through. He's got Kyan Larty just in front, who could be a driver who needs to look behind, because you look at a gap, it's 3.5 seconds for the Finn to chase down the likes of Salmonen in 4th position. So McGregor seeing this as an opportunity to make that launch, to get that move sorted. It doesn't look like 2.5 seconds, but it very much is 2.5 seconds because of the heavy braking zones that you've got. Move lovely done there, as you've also got Bayer there in the background against Bergier trying to find that move, and Bergier able to hold on in the number 15 machine, just keeping things nice and steady out there. And there is Maveni Fleur, who is going to try and get everything sorted on the inside, and is going to lose out the place in the end on that outside line.
Yeah, things still quite tense here in the mid-pack as drivers stay close together, and that might look very pedestrian coming out of Mountford Corner, but I can assure you that even though they're doing about 20 miles an hour, it's difficult because this is 1950s technology. These are very thin tires on these cars, and they also take a long time to get slowed up, and they need to preserve these brakes over these 3 hours because there is wear in this sim.
Well, there absolutely is, and of course, the more that you use your brakes, the heavier that you use your brakes, the more wear that you're going to be putting into the car, and as such, the longer the brake zones have to be, the less likely you are to reach top speed. That's a heavy bit of contact there with the wall of the viaduct there for car number 28, trying to keep it out of the trees on the left-hand side, and just about manages it. That's what happens when you overcook it. The pitfall there for Austin Birchfield. Oh, he's going to go straight into the river. Oh, he catches the 30. We got a track blockage.
And he takes a tow. Thankfully, the 30 is going to have to do the same. Estrella gets it off the racing line. Yeah, it can't continue, I think, from here, at least safely. They do have rules about that. Oh, tire was... Okay, there we go. Tire was indeed missing, and now he took the tow. So that went poorly, quickly, only 8 minutes into this 3-hour race. But that tells you the dangers of street racing back in the 50s. Safety was not a concern in sports cars back in this stage.
No, safety, I think, is something that gets chuckled over a drink and goes, you want to be safe? Are you not a race car driver? Are you just a mere mortal? It's that sort of meaning and understanding of what it meant back in the day to be a racing driver. You took your life in your hands every time you got into a car, and effectively you had about a 10% chance of losing your life every time that you stepped behind the wheel and tried to go out there and race, which is a hefty amount, and that's why some of the best racers in the world continue to do it for years and years and years. And you talk about the Sterling Mosses, and you talk about the likes of those drivers who are able to share that lineage. Hardly anybody was able to really manage that. It was about preserving the car as much as possible. Reece Gardner then here in the Mazzantini Ingegnera is going to look over to that right-hand side. I wonder if he's lifting out early to also preserve a bit of engine temp out there in the car as well. They've got overcast conditions, so I expect that track temperature to be a little bit low, and so the ambient air temperature's there as well. Or you could just find the number 2 car there of Kondrowski in the wall. Verman is going to need to have a little bit of help to get going as well as they tangle up, and Kondrowski is going to need to take the long road to Longford if he wants to get that car turned around.
Yeah, probably not as easy to do a little whip turn on these machines. You can see he's having to take his time to carefully get it facing the right way, and in the meantime he is losing position after position as Kondrowski is already last in his class of the S3000 plus. So still has to find reverse now to get it turned around, unless he thinks he can really get that turned.
That might be an issue. Do they even have reverse trying to get that turned around? Of course, this is such an older piece of machinery that's the first question that I'd ask is, well, if they don't have a reverse gear, they're going to be in a bit of trouble, but should be able to go through. There is Komorowski then in the Automobile Sportivo Originale there, just trying to find his way over to 28th position and just jumping up on the scene, trying to stay out of trouble in the early goings. He's still there, by the way, and finally Kondrowski is able to pull away. It took him long enough.
Yep, he's off and going. Look at how the rear of that car really squats, though, in comparison. Very interesting. They can do some setup changes on these cars, but back in the 50s, it was rather limited compared to now on what you can really do to them. Skari Kantonen currently in 15th overall, but our leader in S2000. Now, they will be swapping out later in this race, as this is a team race, with this being an enduro. Bergier looks like he was able to make a pass coming up through Long Bridge. Neither Long Bridge nor Kingsbridge actually exists anymore. Both those bridges are now gone, as a 23 has a heck of a time getting the power down.
Yep, struggling there, and you're going to definitely see with the cars squatting in the rear, so to speak, at the moment. They're trying to get as much grip through the rear tyres as they possibly can. That's why they've got such a high front nose, such a low rear out there. They're trying to get as much contact patch as they can by legitimately jamming the car down into the road surface. That's how they're going to start building up what they can, and they can see your class leaders there on the left-hand side, the 1500 category. Closest out there at the moment, and there is Erwin Bergier, who will look and see that lunge down to the inside by Bayer, who of course is in a different category, and he is going to find his way through in the S3000 class as the 11 there just behind, runs off the road ever so slightly, but we're going to see these drivers having to be really choice and precise, and because this is a little bit of an older style out there of driving that we're going to be seeing, it means that you really have to learn about this circuit. You really have to try and put your time in, the practice in, because how many sims out there in the world have Longford, as Bergier will use the power of his stronger category class to get back through, but expect there to be a little bit easier time on the brakes there by Bayer to get back through in that section. He's not going to manage it, but the point to be made is all these drivers are looking around thinking, right, what do we have to do for this race? Answer to that is going to be just keep the car on the island and try and memorize your braking points, because they're going to be a bit unique, and you're going to have to keep dialing it back for how the brakes are going to be managed.
Yeah, the endurance aspect, I think, very much in play. This gives you an idea of how much you have to get these cars woed up. And if you do see them slide around, that is typical. With drivers were telling us that a little bit of wheel spin off the corner will be faster. So expect them to have a bit of yaw out, but you don't want to have too much, as Ferry takes the fastest lap of the race in the meantime. What about Salminen in a nice little fight for 5th overall? I think that is McGregor just in front of him in the 05.
It's worth noting that's fastest lap in class there, so that very much worked in favour. And there is Larry Salminen, hoping to try and get that move on the 5. Just planting the car there in the middle is Ross McGregor, who's made his way up to and got through Larry Salminen. So he's now fallen behind there in his Equipe Rousseau Tabor Lagarde car, and will now need to try and find that way to really strike back if at all possible. And this long straight, I think this flying mile is going to give a huge opportunity to a number of these drivers to find the passing here today. You're pretty much going to be seeing drivers liking to run the center of the road if they possibly can, just because that's a higher level of the circuit compared to the sides, and so as such you get a little bit of cambering. You can go slightly faster and be a little bit easier on the tires as you do so. On top of it, then hitting the brakes, trying to get as far over to the right hand side as possible to get it slowed up. And look at how much turn they're going to have to put into that old-timey steering wheel. There's no power steering. You can't just flick the car through and go through the steering motion. You've got to absolutely take your time, let it go round, and then you'll find the ability to make the turn you want.
I mean, just look at the veins on his hands there. Looks like they put some real muscle into these virtual drivers. And the other thing that's fascinating about this onboard I mean, what windscreen? Look at that. You got a tiny little square to help block the wind for you. Otherwise, you are out in the elements. This is literally head and shoulders above the body of the car.
Yeah, no, this is pretty much a case of you stick your head above the parapet, and even if you duck down as much as possible, you're still going to be slightly above the parapet with the way that everyone's got. They've got goggles, of course, as they drive to keep all of the muck and grime out of their eyes as they go out there and drive in these conditions. But the one thing they're looking at here is basically that square can also be used as a reference. It's not just a case of, okay, this is where we need to be. You've basically got to make sure, drive to the square, keep pointing the car in that square, and if you can keep it within the square as you're going along in this race, you shouldn't have any problems with how you're driving. The moment that you step out of the square is going to be the moment that you start running into troubles.
Liam Dolan, in the meantime, checking in on him in 13th. He's running 5th in the S3000 class currently. He's chasing on Jackson Robillard just in front of him. So close enough that he still could take that 4th place if he just gets a little bit closer. And coming around, it looks like, onto the Tannery Straight as he goes over the railroad tracks there. I'm sure that had to have been scary, hoping that the officials did everything they could, make sure the trains have indeed been stopped for the day.
Oh, that'd be great to have in our Factor 2. Live train crossing.
I got to imagine that they had to have done that for the race. But, I mean, you never know with the 50s stuff as we watch them head down towards Tannery Corner. Well, I love one of the driver's comments on this one is the nice thing about that turn is that back then, again, safety wasn't a thing, but they had a nice big field to the outside, so plenty of runoff.
Oh yes, lots of runoff to go through. Very Chris Meek-like in Mexico. You could have that level of runoff to go through. But Liam Dolan up the hill, looking over to Newry Corner and really trying to attack through and get what is possible. 3 retirees then from this race early, and we expect attrition to be a factor around here, but the gaps have certainly opened up to start this racing. But once more for Liam Dolan, he's just thinking about what can I get next. It's a case of next car along, 3 seconds. Okay, how do I pull back those 3 seconds over the course of the race? And that's going to be the sit to Robillard right now. How do you get through? I believe we're going to get ourselves a replay here of Luke Kondrowski, and I think this is what's pretty much put him out of contention in this race, and this would have been heading his way down the hill, and there is going to be all sorts of concern. Oh, he's taken out a pylon, and a little bit more there. He's wrapped himself around a telegraph pole, and that's going to be a headache.
Oh, just maybe did not anticipate the width of the car there because he just clipped it. And I wondered about how wide he was going at this stage. In the meantime, the 13 definitely hanging it out, coming through the viaduct and now on over King's Bridge, heading up to Longford Corner. This is where you essentially hit the town of Longford and then head on up over that railway that you just went under a few moments ago, past the pub, and then picking up speed. You were talking earlier about watching the temperatures. This is, from what I'm told, a track where they won't have to worry about the temps too much as long as they don't over-rev the cars. If anything, they're going to want to watch the revs and make sure that they do keep the oil temperatures, because if the oil temperatures get too low, the car won't perform as well.
Yeah, of course, when you've got oil temperature to think about, the oil of the car basically is what keeps it going. If the car was a human, it would be the blood. If it's not flowing as quickly, you've got less ability to go out there and to basically generate anything out there. So you talk about needing the oil, you need that for the brake horsepower. You're talking about the oil, you need it to make sure that if you've got enough brake horsepower going through that engine, that you've got enough top speed to match those around and keeping those in play. Martin Beyer, once again in the Akip Galini car, really getting aggressive through the corners, sliding it about, giving an absolute race to Bergier, who's of a different class. And they've also got Baka Celadon, who is there behind too, in the same mix. So these three will be looking out at what they need to be doing, and I think Celadon is going to be one who would like to get through this pretty quick. It's like watching a shark fin there, going through what is a land shark, so to speak, at this point. And there's the pivot over to the right from Bergier, right down the end of the straight. And we'll get a little look then at how important this move's going to be, because Bayer's going to lose 2 for the price of 1, as there goes back Celadon straight through on the inside. And Celadon might not be waiting for just 1. He might want them both.
He's looking, but I don't think he's quite close enough. In fact, he hasn't got the pass completely done. Clips the tires on the apex just enough that he'll get away with it as he accelerates off the corner. There's the second one. Remember, all these cars with quite different gearing. And in fact, they can't change individual gears like they used to. Am I seeing right that we got maybe, is that a little bit of spitting of rain there on the windscreen?
Ooh, that's going to throw a cat amongst the pigeons here if they're now going to have to start dealing with rain, and we're only 20 minutes into this race. So that's going to put a lot of drivers in with a lot of trouble out there over the course. This track's going to get slipperier and more difficult, and the markers are going to be there. Most drivers struggle with a dry to wet transition now, Joe. Imagine trying to do that in classic cars when you've only got a screen and suddenly the screen is full of rain, which is just streaking across it.
Yeah, I will say I was told there are no windshield wipers, but I mean, considering the windscreens on these things are tiny, I don't think that you really need it. It's more, well, can you see through those goggles? Through the mist. It doesn't seem to be raining hard. It must be very light that the cars are going through. That was predicted. They didn't say how much, but they figured a little bit of rain happening early in the race. From there, it should start to dry out through the remainder. And we're almost about, actually just past 20 minutes into this event, so we're still quite early.
Yeah, no, this is still the finding out stage of this race. You're trying to find out, okay, well, how quick can I go? How quick can I push? What are all of my rivals doing as they cross over the South Esquerda? And there is Gerard Rion out there in the, I would say, Borussia Dortmund colours there, the black and the yellow, Bumblebee-esque, moving through then at the Longford corner, and now making the long drive up over the railway over towards the Tannery corner, and really trying to keep in range of those cars around. And this is going to be a longer pit stops that we're going to see. Of course, we are in effectively the 1960s here, Joe, so it's not the case that you've got 50 people worth of crew out there to lift the car up and change the tyres and get it done in 3.4 seconds. No, this is old school.
Yeah, don't even have the 60s. This is 1953 is what they've modeled these cars after. And if you're wondering, Equipe Golini, you know, what the heck is that? Well, they're modeled after real sports cars of the era, but because, you know, they want to respect copyright, they're similar to, but not quite, as somebody goes a little too deep. I'm trying to figure out who that was that we lost there.
David Celadon in the Jungle Cat Car's car is finding out how tough it is as he abandons off the road and has to get a massive slide going to get back on and going again. That's Rhys Gardner, who's found his way through second in class to Martin Bayer in the Equipe Golini, who is leading out there at the moment. There is also, with the copyright that's there on top, you got to look at as well, Joe, the fact that these drivers wanted to do their own fine-tuning, their own fettling. It's very much the case of, you know, you get dedicated tuning companies out there in the world, and basically they've got, say, for example, a Porsche 911, but you'll call it a roof 911 because it's got all of the roof tuning. So you've changed the engine, you've fiddled about with the gears, you've done as much as you can to it to make it its own personality of car.
Yeah, that's a good way of comparing it. Think of it, yeah, like the roof versus the Porsche, which they do have their own version. I love this. They've named it the Prosh. For this series.
Alain Prost?
Yeah, exactly. Wrong country, though. The number 23 is definitely hounding the car ahead here. And Erwin Bergier going to have to try and go defensive maybe a little bit coming into the kinked braking of Tannery corner. No, he's going to leave the door open, but he doesn't get overtaken into the 90-degree right-hander.
Well, here's the issue that you've got right now. If you're Martin Beyer, you're battling with a car, and you can see the work he's having to do on the wheel here just to keep himself going forward. It's the fact that you are dealing with a car that is theoretically quicker, and there's a little slide through the long bridge and over up the top of the hill and in towards that right of Newry corner. Beyer has got the car absolutely pointed where he wants to. You look around and you say, well, his opponent right now very much doesn't, but it's always going to have the power to make the move back. So every time he makes the move, he's going to lose that place back again on the straight. And that's going to keep bogging him down, getting him frustrated, and he can't afford to play those games with an 8-second lead here at the front of this field.
Exactly. Each of these cars with their own strengths and weaknesses. Looks like we have lost Liam Dolan as our latest DNF. I see him dropping down the field. The 15 easily breezes by, and there's that frustration you were talking about, just leaving him with really no option other than to continue to try and see if he can outdo him in the corners, at least for now. But nothing doing down into Mountford as they'll try to out-accelerate him, both of them flicking the tail out.
Yep, and now looking to try and get that drive off the exit and make that long run over to the viaduct and keep on that charge. And this is where Martin Beyer, I think, is going to have to just be a little bit conservative. We have got changes in the S1500 category at the moment with Ferry and Chauvetot out there, both giving it a great race in the 43 and the 42 cars. You can see them right now. They're going to be dueling along the straights, looking for chances then to make this race theirs. And the one thing they'll be dealing with here is lap traffic, and that's going to be one of the toughest things you're going to be finding over the course of this race. How on earth do you make passes in an endurance race when you've only got the width of the road, which is designed for 2 and 2 only?
Yeah, a lot of respect needed, essentially, is the answer. And we've seen most of that today. They're trying to give each other room with the 42, having to go very narrow into that corner, and that will give him the lead. Chauvetot now the top of the S1500 class.
Yep, and giving himself 0.2 of a second's worth of buffer, as we're going to take a look at what happened here to Liam Dolan in his Scuderia Favero. So this is down the hill towards the viaduct, and it's very easy to get it wrong at the viaduct corner. He's trying to get it slowed down, Oh, hay bale and fire.
Thankfully, don't have to worry about the dangers that the real drivers had to worry about, but man, he must have had a massive hit then if it immediately lit up like that. Oh, here we go. This is for top spots. This is a battle for P2 coming down into Mountford with the 43. Looking like he is going to try and take this one right back. This is the lead for, battle for the lead in the S1500s once again. So middle of the field, but lead in class. They're going to be side by side. Coming down into the right-hander, who is deeper on the brakes. It is going to be the 42.
And it was really difficult for them in that battle because they had the likes of Kirsten going through, they had McGregor diving through as well along that straight, and of course Pradhan, who was there in second position. So you got Pradhan versus Kirsten, and McGregor desperately trying to jump up onto it. You know, the one thing that those drivers in that class didn't want to do was cede any opportunity, and that's why Jerry Ferry, which is a fantastic alliterate name for a racing driver, and I would say quite apt for the time, is now looking to try and get his Akip Galini to drive on through and gain as much time as possible and build as much as they can, because they've only got 3 seconds to Andrews. And look at Nicky Kirsten really sliding back. Here's Philippe Lecoq-Tabo-Lagarde car going on through towards then off the Kingsbridge to Longford corner. That is just telling you how committed he's going to have to be with Pradhan and getting that opportunity. And the good thing you've got over at Longford corner, Joe, is you've got a massive barn door that you can look at. And if you can line yourself up with the barn door, you can get yourself perfectly situated for Longford corner.
Which both of them do pretty well, but unfortunately for Kirsten, doesn't really get a good enough run on Pradhan for that P2. This is all about 16 seconds behind our leader, Brown, who's been running away in this first stage of the race. Looking back from Donat to Nicholas, and Nicholas is going to try and dive down to the inside. He's better on the brakes. He gets the apex away from him, and it looks like Donat has no answer. Yeah, we're starting to see more of that sprinkling out on the track.
can definitely see here that McGregor is also closing up. You can see it in the background there, the white and the red of McGregor on his crusade to move to second position if he at all can, past Kirsten, if that is possible. Pradhan, of course, who took the race lead away in the very early laps of this one, fallen back in terms of pace, and I wonder whether he's got a car that's maybe a little bit highly strung to the wet weather conditions, that maybe there's a little bit less confidence around it, because it's one thing to practice a circuit in the dry. Tell me, how many drivers would have practiced this circuit in the rain, Joe?
Well, hopefully they did, because as we said, it was predicted that there would be a little bit at the start of the race. So, I mean, hopefully they did their homework as Martin Bayer goes off in what looks like Tannery Corner.
Leader. That's big. That's a class leader, Joe. And Martin Bayer, remember, was scrapping all the time out there with the 7th in class S3000 Plus. The one thing I hope hasn't happened is those two have come together. So for Martin Bayer, this is a real shock to the system, and he'll have to do that work. And he had, of course, an 8-second lead, and now he's 9 seconds adrift.
Yeah, that does kind of say maybe something went wrong between them, since it was that would usually take about 10 seconds to get the car turned and going, as Nicholas Kirsten coming up into the viaduct once again. They'll disappear under there and the trees before they emerge on the other side, head over through Kingsbridge, one of the more narrow parts of the track. This is, again, battle for P2 out there in the S3000 Plus class.
Yeah, and so when you've got these drivers up near the front trying to do what they need to, you've got Pradhan, and they'll all be looking around at the marshals who are strapped behind 5-bar gates and trees and fence posts, and sometimes maybe even with the way they go at Longford Corner, right behind people's back garden fences out there. They're going to really try and get as much as they can of the traffic to move to get on sorted. Now we're going to take a little look. This is what happened to Martin Bayer, and this looks like it's very much on his own. Heading up towards Tannery Corner, he just overcooks it, and he goes straight into the farmer's field, and he has to do a full 360 and wait for the traffic to rejoin the circuit again. You can't go straight on like that.
Yeah, the corn's not ready, buddy. You can't quite harvest it yet. So back onto the track he goes, and we check out with Kirsten versus Pradhan. About a second between them now, much bigger than what we had seen before, where it was quite the hot fight. Ooh, oh, things getting so close to those sort of white picket fences along the bridge. Definitely don't want to flirt with those too much. In the real world, you could easily go over them, and these, I believe, they're solid, so they're not going to be going into the water. But if anything, that's almost a little bit worse if they're this solid, because so much damage can be done to these cars.
Look, I would say that the version of safety that they've gone with, Joe, is they've gone with reinforced picket fence, which is something to say they've probably got some metal cladding there that they've painted white, just to keep giving it the illusion of that fence as they've gone on through. But Pradhan still having to deal with Kirsten and McGregor, and it's McGregor looking the more likely now, all of a sudden, after Kirsten's mistake has put Pradhan back through. And look at what they're trying to chase down. Every time they go along this stretch, if they got a little bit there, that's going to help. But it looks like Robillard is out of the race, and he was running up inside that top 10 very nearly.
Yeah, he was amongst some of the better positions in the S3000 as well. So we've got a replay. Let's see if that is of his incident here. Yep, this is going to be Jackson. So what took him out? And again, we've seen it with many cars up till now. It is that viaduct chicane, which is one of the few real technical corners in this track. Everything else is pretty straightforward.
And notice there in that incident, Joe, how very nearly the car in front found the barriers on top, as there goes Mifonwi Fleur to make that move in the Billy Cummings 01 machine and into 11th place. How easy was it to nearly run off? And that's sometimes what you can fall into with a pitfall. If you're battling a car of the same class, you use the same braking zone when it's so long, and you know that there's nothing you can do the moment that you hit the brake, because you're just waiting of, did I get it right? 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds later, oh, I'm in the fence, I did it wrong.
Yeah, these cars are very momentum based, and once they're on a trajectory, you can't do much to change it. So you have to be 2 steps ahead of the car at all times, fighting here for 11th. Cantonen versus Mafan Fleur. Two cars that are not in the same class, mind you, but overall position, I'm sure, just as important. Cantonen might not want to fight as much because he's leading the S2000 handily, so he can almost afford to allow Mafan by.
Yep, he very much can, and the challenge that they have, I think, is going to be very, very stark. Now, in terms of how quick can you go around this circuit, the fastest ever lap time around this track was a 2:12.6, which was set by Chris Amon in 1968, which was the last time that this circuit was run. And one of the things that you've got to remember about this track is that this was the fastest average lap speed of any Australian motor racing circuit, Joe, until the construction of the Calder Park Thunderdome in Melbourne, which is basically Australia's take of speedway racing.
Yeah, and there was some debate on that because, well, I mean, it's an oval, so does that really count? The road circuit-wise, from what I understand, it wasn't until Albert Park, so into the 90s, and that's F1 cars that you had a fastest average speed quicker than what this circuit did. That looks like a car slightly out of control coming down into Mountford. The 10 is going to get it woed up just in time, but that looked very sketchy.
Well, they're going to be right on the limits here because they're trying to find position, second, third and fourth, 21 seconds. Adrift of Brown, who leads this race outright. Nicholas Kirsten in the middle of this sandwich, probably not where he wants to be at this moment in time. He'd like a little bit of respite, but he knows that if he's not defending, he's attacking. If he's not attacking, he's defending. At the moment, he's defending, diving down the hill, over towards the viaduct, hitting the brake. And that's what makes it so underrated, actually, as a corner, the viaduct. And what makes the challenge is you've got to do the braking halfway through the turn before.
Yeah, and downhill on top of things. So yeah, it is a diabolical corner. Now, some of this, I thought maybe was smoke, might be actually mist being kicked up. Yeah, now look at the rain. I noticed that on our timing and scoring, it's giving us the wetness of the track. It's been 0 to 15% for all of the race up till now. Now it's jumped up to 0 to 40%. So I think it is significantly wetter out on the circuit now.
You're certainly seeing it in areas of the track where it's a little bit bumpier than you can imagine. For example, you see there with Maddie Shepherd and the way she's driving out there at the moment, that on the line that isn't being naturally run, you are getting that water build-up, and you're not necessarily getting as much of that, Joe, on the racing line, because these drivers are still running around it and they're doing just enough out there to stave off that water hitting on the track as heavily, and they're actually clearing it with the tyres that they've got, so it's not so much of a trouble there. But you're now starting to see there a pronounced line on the circuit. I think the moment you start stepping out of line, you're going to find out just how slippery this circuit's going to be, and the number 32 machine there doing exactly that, proving a point.
Yeah, that was Matt Wright, thankfully catching the car. That would be a case of too much wheel spin out of the corner. Maddie Shepherd, in the meantime, versus Max Schrapp coming down the flying mile. This is the longest straight on the track, kicking up more of that water as they come up towards the braking. Hopefully they've taken that into account now that they come down. Yeah, more and more of the moisture on the track being very visually apparent. And you might think, oh, this is going to be more difficult than the older tires, but I think there's a bit of a trade-off. Maybe the technology wasn't as good, but ironically, the thinner tires are going to be doing better if they get any puddles. That makes it less likely you hydroplane when you have thinner tires.
Absolutely, and of course when you hydroplane, that's where the car basically pulls the circuit. You basically lose the contact patch with the ground because you're basically going through water, and then the car basically pulls along with where the puddle is, searching for a bit of grip, and ultimately finds none. Maddie, what a bit of driving there through the opening there. Schrapp couldn't do much about that, heading down to the viaduct. That was as brave as you like. It's one of the fastest sections of the circuit, and finding that pass, Maddie Shepherd up the place and trying to prove that there's pace to burn in 14th, with Ryan the next to chase down in 13th position overall of all classes. And we've got a first pitter in right now, and that's Salmonen from 5th place.
Interesting. Now, we mentioned earlier there are some drivers that are swapping out today. Not all of them will. Some will be doing this one solo. 3 hours, that's definitely doable. It's just going to be a rather long and grueling race, especially having to focus for so long. In the meantime, Ross McGregor, third overall here, still chasing on Donut Prodan. He's passed Nicholas Kirsten since we last looked.
Yep, he certainly is, and I think Celadon might be out of the race, so that might be not Celadon or Celadon. Well, either way, out of the race, and that is going to be huge in the context of this. Because it's a short championship, there you can see back of Celadon out. Because it's a short championship, we're talking 5 rounds, Joe. If you make a mistake at round 1, think about how much work you have to do over the next 4 races to pull all that gap back.
Exactly. It's... longer seasons mean consistency is more important, but shorter season means that if you have one little hiccup, then you have little time to try and make that back up. And we're hearing that one was not a driving error. That was his internet. Went out. That was a driving error, though, from the number 8s.
That's what we call summoning an incident there, Joe. Donut Pradan over there, of course, at the very tough verged corner of Newry, finding out what makes this circuit tick. He had been stuck in a battle over and over again with McGregor and Kirsten, and suddenly it snaps.
Looks like we got a replay of Prodan having his incident, as we only saw just a little bit of it. Oh, hit something. Maybe something that wasn't quite modeled right there, because the car certainly had a strange little snap at the end.
Hopefully
didn't get much damage from it.
Yeah, I'd say with the way he's had that contact, I would say the best way to describe what's happened there is he's hit a tree root.
Yeah, that's a good way of thinking of it right there. And really unfortunate. Somebody smoking, maybe? Is there...
That's still the leftover rain.
Still water? Yeah.
I think he might be cooling the tires down, maybe.
Very smart. These tires will last the entire race, but, I mean, they'll still overheat. So, yeah, clever stuff out of him. Definitely caught me by surprise. And, yeah, you can see how much more water is off the racing, like you were pointing out before, that the drivers were dispersing a lot of it, and that illustrates how much it has been raining. Even though visually we can't see quite as well, it's made it a very wet track offline.
It very much has, and these drivers are realising that South Esk River is going to get a little bit larger every time that they go by it, and they go, I hope it doesn't burst its banks. That's something we definitely don't want in the middle of our race. Nicholas Kirsten, though, going at the Longford corner to try and charge up. Devin Brown, though, we haven't talked about him because it's the greatest compliment you can pay over the first 42 minutes worth of racing here, Joe. He's been unstoppable. He's got himself a gap of 27 seconds. He doesn't look like he's going to relinquish it anytime soon, and that's what he's built for, building a gap and running away. And the biggest compliment you can give, you're too good. You're winning this race. We don't need to show you there's no action.
Yeah, exactly. If the leader's not on the screen, usually that's a good sign for the leader. The 6 has just been plugging away. And for those who are thinking that maybe Jake was describing the river as South-like, no, it is the Esk River. So it didn't mean South-esque, just it is the Esk River out there.
ESK for Esk.
Yes, very interesting name. Definitely has a confusing sound when you describe it. But also, definitely one of the more unique circuits. You don't get a lot of tracks that go over a river.
No, you really don't, and it's something that often doesn't get talked about too much in terms of how circuits are built and designed and how they go through. He just raced where it was interesting, so to speak, back in the day, and that's very much what they all had to deal with and had to navigate around. If you've got a little bit of a river in the way, well, you've got a bridge over the top of it. Let's race over the bridge. But a lot of circuits basically looking at nowadays, well, how can we prevent as much rain of going forward? Because the closest thing you're going to get to a river nowadays on a Formula One circuit is if you've got a lot of elevation somewhere and, well, a lot of rain that falls down and creates a natural river.
Exactly. Yeah, IndyCar at the Nashville Street Circuit, unfortunately no longer going to be raced. That was one that you went over it. And not a street circuit, but technically Spa does go over a river, or a creek, I guess you could say, with Eau Rouge.
Belle Isle.
Oh, hello. Oh, Yeah, that is Ali Karjanlanti having a big moment heading into, I think, Tannery Corner, but will at least get it back pointed forward, but the car looks a handful in these wet conditions.
It very much does. It's oscillating around, and I think there's a lot of micro wheel work here for Ollie, who's really finding out that he's got a car that I believe is just built for being in a straight line. The issue that he's got for a car that's so good in a straight line, any sort of sideways movement is going to make that car very loose on the rear, and you put rain in the mix, less grip on the tyres, that car is not going to want to point in a straight direction. It is going to put him in a world of trouble if he's not too careful, and so I think he's got to step with caution here in 8th place.
Yeah, definitely looks like it's unhappy right now, the Jungle Cats machine coming down into the braking into Mountford. At least he has less speed coming through here, and hopefully will be a little bit better. But again, he is struggling, as that is not typical. The 24 off into the left-hand side on the exit of the viaduct. Ryan somehow must have lost it, maybe getting on the power through there.
Yeah, so he'd have been halfway through the corner. I think maybe he spun the car around, kept it out the barriers, but just continued beyond the viaduct as if he was trying to do some form of gymkhana here in a 1953 at Keep Galini. So Gerard Ryan then finding out what makes this circuit difficult. And in the pits there is Ollie Karjanlahti. And that, I think, was pretty much expected in terms of them needing a pit stop. I think they were just getting to the limit where it's not quite in our wheelhouse. We're going to need to do a little bit more to keep this race going in the back of the pocket. So taking this stop now probably puts them on, I would say, a 3-stop strategy for the race.
Seems about right. Other cars that have pitted, Yuri Smit, but I think that may have been for some sort of damage. Steph Hermans has actually been in twice. And then Celadon and Field have been in pit lane and have come back out. So they must have gotten damage repaired. So Celadon, we saw his incident earlier, and I guess he was able to at least get it banged back together and carry on. Brown in the number 6 machine, just ticking off laps bit by bit. That is not for position in behind him. That is a lapped car currently. So no concern for him as he takes his way out of the more narrow parts and over the King's Bridge.
Yeah, and trying to really get some drive going. So this is what happened to Gerard Rion, who got into the corner okay, and then the back stepped out, and then, whoa, how far down do you want to go? He's so lucky he's not collected anything there. He'll be obscured by the viaduct itself. It's a bit wet. It's a bit leafy, I guess is the right thing to say. And, you know, it's always difficult when you're stuck behind some 2D hedges to try and get out. It's almost impossible to try and find the way out, but he's going to very much try and manage it. No, through the vineyards. Oh, no, hit a tree. No, that's not quite what we wanted to see. Finding reverse and tiptoeing his way back up, and it would get very boggy underfoot there. So just about managing to find a way through. Civility once again.
Almost needed real world where you've got the fans to at least be able to point you which way to go to get back on the track itself. And yeah, once he gets back on the circuit, the car seems to be in okay condition despite a couple bumps and bruises. Scuderia Favero leading the way overall and in the S3000 plus class. Currently in this race, about 45 minutes or so into the event. Still plenty left to unfold. And as we said, 50s machinery, so reliability is a concern. We've mentioned the revs on the engines. We've mentioned the oil temps, of course, the brakes. The other thing that's interesting about this is there are a lot of the cars are on disc brakes, but there are some models out there that are on drum brakes. And so very much taking care of them is of key importance.
Yeah, and making sure that those drum brakes don't decide they want to pack up and give up the ghost just gives me chills right now with the way that they're going out there and driving in this race. I think we're very firmly in a pit stop window right now because there is Oskari Kantanen who has dived into the pits, and Karjanlahti has been in the pits for about 3 minutes now, so I think this might be the end of Karjanlahti's race with the way that he's gone about things in this stage. So shame to see that go wrong. 3.5 minutes coming up soon on that pit stop, and that would be quite dramatic. Ross McGregor trying to handily give chase here. He's actually keeping Devon Braun honest in terms of pace. The only issue he's got is that the time it's taken him to get back up to second position, well, there's one thing and one thing only to say. He's given him a 30-second head start there or thereabouts.
Big gaps were relatively common back in this day of an age of racing, so not impossible with plenty of the race left to go, but he's going to have quite a bit of speed, and he's going to have to hustle the car, I imagine, as he comes up to the same lap traffic that Devon was going by a number of laps ago as they break down into the viaduct. That 26 going to be off to the side. Trying to figure out who that is exactly.
Yeah, and so seeing number 6, of course, is potentially different to 06 out there. So I doubt that's going to be your race leader outright who is going to be in trouble. So that's not going to be ideal for that 06 who finds himself in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Looked like Ollie was having trouble getting properly into his pit stall or something, back and up and forward once again, before finally the car got worked on. That's going to be valuable time lost for him. Martin Beyer, meanwhile, sitting in 7th overall, but 2nd in the S3000s. He's currently off of Reese Gardner, who leads that class by about 8 seconds.
Do you reckon that's a brake change?
You know, I'm not sure. I don't know if they have those modeled in this version. This is for those curious, this is a mod of R Factor 2 that they are running, and not sure if that is a part of it. They can change tires, but I think I was told it was something like 50 seconds to get the tires changed.
Well, 50 seconds in comparison to the 4 minutes that's lost, so that would be 50 seconds per tyre if they're working one at a time then at that point. Martin Beyer, still 2nd in class, by the way, still down by 9 seconds over Reese Gardner, who colloquially calls himself the Southpaw Racer and drives absolutely wonderfully for those out there. He doesn't have the use of one of his hands due to what happened to him at birth. He lost all of the nerve endings in one of his hands as he was born, and as such has got a modified steering wheel to go out there and race. And the way that he works and the way that he puts together all these races is simply put fantastic, and to see him out there leading, I think, is a joy to watch.
Yeah, it is impressive what he is able to do. Also, a great commentator. Love working with him, and honestly, one of my favorite senses of humor of anybody to share the booth with. Always has a very wonderful dry quip at the ready for any situation, as Reese continues to lead in class and also 5th overall. So carrying that car quite well, despite being a little bit underpowered compared to all the S3000 plus around him.
Yeah, he's just running that sort of race right now, Joe, where it's, as long as I keep it on terra firma, everything else will work around me. If I keep a solid and consistent pace, I shouldn't have any troubles out there in what I'm doing. And that's what he's sitting down. That's what he's achieving at this moment in time in the number 25 machine, and is doing exactly what he needs to. Now, the only thing out that start, which may have been different from what they had back in the day, Joe, and I hope that one sim sometimes finds a way to do it, someone's got to try and find a way to get a modded Le Mans start sorted where you actually have to run to your car like a button mash.
Yeah, I was going to say the old Nintendo, track and field pad that we had way back in the day. You have to like pound your feet on it, although we all cheated. We used our hands. But it sounds like we might be able to talk to one of the behind-the-scenes folks here for this series, Nicholas Hillebrand, which I'm very eager to chat with, because while I was given a fair bit of information about this mod, I don't know the nitty-gritty as much, and Nicholas might be able to tell us a little bit more about the cars. Nicholas, welcome up to the booth, and we were talking about some of the machines that these are sort of supposed to kind of imitate. Do you have any more info, such as the Scuderia Favero that we've got here?
Hello there. Yeah, first of all, thank you for welcoming me along, as always. And I mean, basically the biggest overhaul that we did for this season is, basically adjusting all the cars to the proper brake logic. So if you're into historic racing, you will know already, of course, this is the big changing situation from, drum brakes to disc brakes. And only a few cars actually in this grid have disc brakes. So all the Gollinis and the Jungle Cat cars have disc brakes. And everyone else is on drums. So, a completely different braking behavior, completely different behavior with the different temperatures, and of course also a crux that you have to work around when you're racing on the limit. So, for example, here now with what you mentioned with the Favero, with the 37P, the works car, currently being driven by Devin Brown of our racing team, as they very creatively called it. It's an incredibly heavy car, 5-liter V12. So, of course, he can push on the limit for a certain amount of time, but the drum brakes will, of course, at some point start to fade. So he'll have to adjust the braking, he'll have to let off a little bit. And the Jungle Cat cars Mark D, which unfortunately we just lost our second one in the race to an accident. That thing can pretty much just push far more reliably, can push far more consistently, especially on Longford here, which is, I'm pretty certain, the hardest track on the calendar for the brakes.
And curiously, the other setup thing that I read that you guys can do here is that some cars, you can either change out the radiator, or we go NASCAR style and they can add tape to the grill to kind of help both the temperatures or give them a little bit more straight line speed. How much do you think that plays into today with all these long straights?
I don't think it adds in too much. It's a main thing that overall the cars didn't change too much. It's basically for the top end in the end, so around Legrand, so for the season, midway point pretty much, for the 6 hours of Legrand, that's going to play a bigger part, I think, because in the end, these engines, of course, have a peak temperature, so they will obviously be also in a different operating window, so a bit better, like, power response and all that. And in the end, of course, lower drag, of course, as well. So these guys have to balance, of course, having this lower drag, of course, wanting the minimum amount of cooling possible, but the maximum amount that they need. And since these cars are quite fragile as well, typical 1950s style, they will have to run higher cooling, of course, in the race than in qualifying.
Yeah, a 3-hour race of this nature, I imagine just getting to the finish is going to be its own thing. What about these various classes? Can you talk to us a little bit about the differences between them? We've got everything from the S3000 Plus all the way down to the S1500. Oh, sorry, we got a wreck on screen. The 34 just had a big moment and gets it going right in front of the 32. Maddie Shepard, the car looks like it is going to carry on okay.
Lead. That is absolutely the S2000 lead right now. Pretty much having its change right. Will now take assumption there, and that was pretty much the last thing that you'd want if you're leading. The 22 car having a bit of a slide through the corner as well, so they're going to have to be cautious on the exit, and this is what oh no, this is scary. How long are you going to be able to save it? Oh, you're out of road, straight down into the river and under the banking there. Oh my goodness me, what a crash.
Oh, really sad to see for Ollie. That's another of those Jungle Cats cars. Sorry to interrupt there, Nicholas. I had quite a bit of action. We were talking about the difference in the classes.
All of course good, but yeah, the 3-liter plus, of course, they're the big sports cars. Basically, all the great brand manufacturers went into there. Tabor, Lagarde, Favero, Jungle Cat cars. They're all, of course, the homages to the real life cars of the year. With Lancini, of course, for example, Lancia, the D24 that won the Carrera Panamericana in real life, and Favero, Ferrari, obviously. But yeah, these are basically the big cars, pushing over 260 kilometers an hour, and pushing almost to 280 kilometers an hour with the streamlined Mark D. In general, over 250 horsepower, and also the heaviest among the bunch generally. except for the 2 outliers, which are actually the Jag and the Lancini. Then the 3 liter, of course, slightly lighter, around just under 250 kilometers an hour top speed, and then it's basically just going a bit lower and lower and lower. And there's this very nice shift in focus on driving, basically. That's, from the 3 liter plus, you basically focus on, trail braking into the corner and then focusing on having a good exit, using all of the power that you have. And it basically switches over when you go down to 1.5 liters. In the 1500s, you basically just focus on carrying all of the momentum all the time. So yeah, it really rewards clean driving, and that just really makes them, in my opinion, some of the best starter cars in sim racing in general.
They're a lot of fun to watch. We've been enjoying watching everybody whip these things around the corners. So we are watching on board with Martin Beyer, who's currently second in the S3000s. So you guys have 5 races total this season, so relatively short, but with some excellent tracks. Is there any one in particular you're really looking forward to getting to show off with all the various mods that you guys have implemented?
I'm biased because in general I'm just a little bit insane when it comes to these cars. We raced this last year once in the historic sim organization Gold Star Championship with this very same mod, just obviously with an older variant. But Monte Carlo, the season finale, will, I think, be an absolute blast because the circuit is just, it's in its purest form. It's quite a lot faster than it is nowadays. And in multi-class, we had a few very, very insane situations, but in the best possible way. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing these guys and girls tackle it around there.
Well, Nicholas, we can't thank you enough for coming along and giving us a little of the insider info. We'll hopefully get to check in with you at least one more time before this is over. And thank you so much for bringing us on board, because already first round in, we're having fun.
Yeah, glad to hear it, guys. Thank you very much, as always, for putting on a fantastic broadcast. And hopefully next 2 hours will be very entertaining as well.
That was Nicholas Hillebrand, one of the organizers here of the Carrera Mundial. We're watching Matt Wright, currently in the 32, who is now our leader in the S2000 class after Maddie Shepard had her little mistake. Gap between them only 1.5 seconds, so she's still in the background hanging on, watching, seeing whether or not the 32 will similarly have a hiccup.
By no means the end of the world after 1 hour being 1.5 seconds down. A mistake to have. You'd rather have it early than late because you've got no time to gather it back up. There is Bergier, and remember how Bergier was struggling to get through. You can see the rain there, really epitomizing everything underneath there, the railway tracks, which were found there by Oscari earlier on. Bergier with a quicker car than Rhys Gardner. It's part of the 3,000 plus category. Rhys here holding his line, not wanting to deviate here, and a big throw down the inside in the rain. And can he find it down on that inside? Mind the tyres. He just flicks up over one of them and says, you know what? Now we're going to go out there and attack over the railway.
Traded at the pub, and now he's going to try and hold on to it as long as he can. But here we go with that long straightaway, the speed of the Tannery straight heading up into Tannery corner. He's forced to go defensive and cover the inside. Bergier going to see whether or not that is going to be enough, especially under braking as they get on the binders, and indeed it is. He will hold them off at least for now.
Yep, so being able to hold off that charge and now focus on the next phase of the race. Rhys would actually quite like to stay behind Bergier for a little bit if he can keep the pace up. And the reason why is going to be about slipstream. Because that is a faster car in front than Rhys Gardner, he's got no worries about making that overtake on the straight. He can just basically latch a tow bar onto the back of the number 15 car and go, you know what, free ride, let's hook it up like I'm holding onto one of those old school buses and I'm on a skateboard.
Exactly. Should be able to help the fuel mileage, I imagine, and these are thirsty cars, mind you, but as long as he can hold on, that will help give him a little extra speed and help him get farther into this race. Now, speaking of the fuel, the other interesting thing about these cars is I've been told when they are high on fuel, they actually handle better, and that's because of that lack of traction. So as they continue to burn off here as it goes, don't be shocked if we see more cars that look like the handling has gone away.
Well, the one thing you got to remember is that the fuel's dumped into the rear of the car, so they've got a heavier car and they're trying to push that down. The longer that the stint goes on, the less fuel's in the car, the higher that rear is going to be sitting as it goes. And when you've got a really light car, you're going to have to try and start dancing. You're going to have to try and start finding some ways to generate that rear grip that you didn't have before. And that's going to be the point of concern that you're talking about there, Joe. These drivers will lose handling because of the fact that they're losing all of that, effectively call it rear ballast, in the back of the car the longer that the stint goes.
Somebody's revving here, I'm hearing.
Uh-oh.
And it's the 34 off the track. Is
Maddie.
that Shepard? It is. Loses gobs of time to our leader in S2000 class, but she stays in second as DeBerzy, who's the next car down, is not close enough to capitalize, but you could tell she was well off track there.
Appreciation of some English slang there, Joe. But yeah, Maddie Shepard not having too much of a fun time down there at the viaduct, and I think a lot of drivers can say that that viaduct they wish they won't see again for at least the rest of this season after this, as they now ticky-tacker over the tracks and now look to charge again along the straight. But we'll get a replay of what happened to Maddie here, on her own then running through. Oh, back end steps out initially, and then you're trying to stop the car, and oh dear, straight into the barriers like so, getting a little bit of an endo like it's Tony Hawk. They're going on through and then descending into the field, not as far as what Oscari did, but enough to go and get that back. But it's an uphill rise when you've got no speed. You could very easily stall the car there.
Yeah, it looked like it was just a glancing blow on the nose, so maybe hopefully got away with it. But the time is lost, the damage is done, and she just has to carry on. Hope that she's either got the speed or that maybe there's another mistake as well from Reese Gardner up in front. The car really dancing on its way over the long bridge.
And trying to get some drive up off of the exit there. You can see it's the number 23 car that's trying to get through. That's Bayer, who is the leader in class out there at this point. So now that's going to be a case of straight through you go, class versus class, and Maddie Shepard just happily letting that go. And now we're going to be seeing here that the categories are split then as they go through. You can see the gaps, for example, 86 seconds between Prodan and Bergier. Bergier not quite in class, as Morphine Fleur is going to jump into the pits, and you've got the likes of the 100-second there gap, which is there. And there is Mifanui Fleur, who is down in the pits and looking to try and make that stop.
They were warned coming into this race that you need to make sure and be extra careful because there is no pit wall. Again, old school style. They didn't have pit walls back then. That's a relatively recent introduction. Well, not relatively recent, but didn't really become more common until, say, the 60s and 70s, where they started to separate the pits from the track itself.
Yes, and that would have been down to safety because you'd have had so many pit fires by cars crashing and going into the pits, where drivers and pit crew would have had basically no chance to avoid the incident there. And of course you got those ignitable fuel tanks which would have been down there in the pits at the time, so that pretty much would have determined, yeah, we need to protect ourselves here, and that's why pit barriers effectively were put into racing. So that's something just to keep in mind. A little bit of air there for Devin Braun. He's going that fast, he's flying out there at the moment. Still though, those 28 seconds to the good, hitting the brakes, going down into the viaduct corner and maintaining that gap with McGregor. And you feel for Devin Braun that this is a case where, yeah, you've got a 28-second lead, but I don't think he's in a position where he can really take his foot off the throttle right now, as out of the pits goes Fleur to continue on in the number one blue and white machine.
Yeah, Braun, every time we turn to him, the car just looks so much more planted than all the others. His motions and his controls feel very smooth in comparison, and that just makes the difference. That's why he is so far ahead of everybody else. He's in much more control of the car.
Oh, he very much is, and this is a simple demonstration of what happens when you can get to the front of the field and start thinking about building a gap, because 1 second becomes 2 seconds, becomes 5, becomes 10, becomes 30, and it's become 30 in this race for Devin Braun, and he's not doing anything too untoward, really. He's just putting the car in the right places. He's not attacking. You can see there's hardly any movement of the car coming off of the exit of these corners. We're in changeable conditions as well, so you'd expect a lot to go along through, especially over the long bridge and heading over then towards that next Newry corner. And it's so difficult because you've got to take that wide apex line. That's Reese Gardner there just in front. He's lost the lead to Bayer. So what's happened there for Reese?
Must have been something major, because I think he had a decent-ish gap, more than just an off perchance. We'll see whether or not we can find it in a bit. The car is going, and we've got a replay, so it didn't damage it. If that's the case, he's coming in down into Newry corner and goes a little bit hot, and yeah, he did indeed. So, but the car was able to keep moving, and he's back up to speed here on the flying mile pretty quickly.
Yeah, but it just shows you how much time you can lose if you go off. And Jerry Ferry in a battle once again out there on track in his S1500 category. And they try and dive their way towards Longford corner now. And it's about, do you have the pace and speed? The answer is yes, but they're queuing up behind. They want to try and get through. Excuse me, I don't really want to be fighting here with Ferry and Chauvetot. And these drivers are there. And remember, the car third in the line, that's Andrews, who's third in class. So 1, 2, and 3 in the 1500s, all there together.
This begs the question, is his proper name Gerald Ferreld?
Jeremy Ferremy?
Apologies to Jerry if this is your real name, but sorry, I couldn't resist. And gonna get overtaken by a faster class car. Again, these classes are only racing for overall position, maybe for pride. Otherwise, for points, they're not fighting one another. And he should allow that car easily through. Wow, big whip of the tail coming around through Tannery corner.
Styling making that happen. We're going to take a second look at it, I think, in terms of how they went through. This is going to be earlier on, and this is why Jerry Ferry found himself a little bit backed up with that group. So slowing for the yellow flag, and you don't want to see that as you run through the viaduct corner. You're blind as you go through. That would be the number 42 machine there, and that would have been the move that got Jerry Ferry up into the race lead over Chauvetot. So Chauvetot, having that mistake at the viaduct, going broadside around it, now having a lot of work to do to get back into the race lead once more.
Yeah, these are the days where those yellow flags meant definitely try to slow down, because you didn't have radios and things back in this day to let you know what was up ahead. A yellow flag meant there is really something wrong, and you don't know what necessarily. So ease up, make sure you can avoid whatever potential problems there are ahead. As Reese Gardner now takes his service, and we'll get back out. We head over to Ross McGregor, who sits in second.
Yep, so Ross there in the 05 Rafa Racing Club 37P, really finding out some good pace at this moment in time. So he is certainly doing what he needs to with a car that is just fighting him a little bit out there at the moment, and he'll be trying to gather it back as much as he can. I tell you what, with the way that car is designed, it looks very much a case of driving perfection out there at this point. He's got a lot to deal with at this point, but over the last few laps, he has dropped about 7 or 8 seconds. So that is, of course, a concern for McGregor, which might just indicate that he's a little bit light on fuel, and he's just trying to make it to a point, because if he can get it to an hour and a half, as in comes your race leader, then, of course, he can one-stop the race. It's a 2-stop at the moment, which he sits on, of course, with Brown deciding, you know what, I can only make it go an hour and 13.
Which still should break it up pretty easily into a 2-stopper. Watching on board with McGregor. Is he going to do likewise coming on in, or is he going to carry on for a lap and lead? It looks like he's going to carry on, and he keeps on going down past Braun. So for the first time since this early in the race, somebody else is going to be at the points.
Yep, so for McGregor, his first lap that he will now lead in this race is going to be one which he can be quite happy with at this moment in time, knowing that he's built a very nice gap over Kirsten of about 18 seconds at this point. So he's just got to try and build and develop on that, knowing that it's going to be a long stop here for Brown, because it's not a case that you got the automatic fuel hose and a very pixely pit crew member to go alongside with. It's the fact, Joe, that you've got to basically manually put that fuel in, and that meant surely back in the day, like some of the other series that they're sort of the lower level American series, that you had to fill it up with jugs.
Yep, exactly. You had a can and you had a funnel, and you'd try and get it in there as quickly as you could while not starting a fire on top of things. Because remember, if it spills on this hot car, it could easily light up. I can only imagine how scary that must have been back in the day. Also worth noting that these top three have really been absolutely running away. Honestly, even top four, because you get down to Bergier back there in fifth position, and it's another 50 seconds to the next nearest car up ahead.
It says all that you need to know with how much going there. Now, we're hearing words that there's another driver who is now out of... Oh, and in the barriers there, just in front of Reese Gardner, another car finds itself in trouble. I think that's going to move him up into fifth position.
That may have been... Well, so here's Steph Hermans, who is, we think, the DNF just recently. Oh, too hot into the turn, and he finds the tree. Gets it out of the racing line pretty quickly, but I imagine, yeah, he's trying to drive it away, but he finds it. It's a little bit too much, so probably going to see him park it here.
Yeah, and basically that's going to be some of the toughest bits of action that you see out there when you're trying to limp a damaged car back home. It's a very tough one. He might have had better luck just taking the public road at about 30 mile an hour up to Launceston, which is the main port city of Tasmania. So they're not a million miles away from that here in Tassie. So they've got a little bit of work to go to get through. Oh, that's a hefty amount of banking there for Reese Gardner as he takes a chunk out there. That would have sent a shock pretty much about 3 foot in the air through his carbon fiber, or through his car, so to speak, the aluminium that's there as he's built the car. So ultimately for Reese Gardner, that would have been a scary moment.
That car that we saw go off in front of him earlier, that was Chris Gordon. He is now DNF'd, so it must have been a pretty serious one as he drops down the order. That's our third of the S3000 category to DNF. Both them and the S3000 Plus have really suffered today.
So that's a driver change then for the 06. So Devin Brown out the car, Timotej Andonovski into the machinery now. So for Timotej, he has got the job of defending a half a minute's lead when McGregor and Kirsten and Prodan decide they want to dive down into the pit. So work to be done by the 06 team. They've got more advantage to try and build.
Ron still hasn't pitted in the 05. So he carries on. 27 gets his stop and heads back out on the track. That is Yuri Schmidt. Got a replay. This is probably going to be of Gordon. So coming up to Longford.
Oh, he doesn't get it in very well, and then the rear steps out when he needs a bit of power to try and bring it back. So the Dietmar Brett's auto car absolutely makes a mess of the hay bales. They spent all night trying to put those hay bales up, and look at that. Chris Gordon comes along, knocks them all down, and says, "My car don't work no more."
This explains why he is out. It seems hitting that rear of the car, like you said, they're fragile. They made them as light as they could, which still probably seems quite heavy in comparison to today's cars, but they didn't have all that special structure to help them deal with hits like that. Larry Salmonen currently in 8th overall, but 6th in class. Only car behind him in the S3000 Plus is Mafon Fleur that's still running. The others behind have DNF'd, unfortunately.
Yeah, which goes to show you how tough it's been in the middle pack to try and put things together, that we got a lot of retirees in from the middle groups of this field and not necessarily from top and tails out there. So it's a tough race. We've been seeing it as Larry Salmonen continues on in 8th position right now, trying to give some chase. Vuurman is going to be that car to chase down, 82 seconds down the road. So Larry with a lot of work to do in order to bring that time and get that back to something a little bit more satisfactory to what Larry's liking would be. So he's definitely trying to make some chase here in the middle, and you get into the middle of an enduro, you start thinking about stringing the laps together. Sometimes you get a few mistakes that come in, but you're trying to string the laps. This is where the consistency time comes into play.
So far, barring that consistency, the fast cars still is that 06 with a 2:37.4. In fact, I think the only team that has managed to break the 2:38 mark around this track. Everybody else seen very close for Ross McGregor, 2:38.010 for their fastest lap as they continue to lead, but still owe us a pit stop where we're expecting they'll hand that back to Andonovski once they cycle through. We're on board with Darren Andrews in the meantime, sitting in 20th overall. This is on the podium for the S1500s.
Yeah, and you can't really say that Darren Andrews has done much wrong here in this one. He hasn't had the out-and-out pace of Chauvetot and Ferry, who are there in front of him, but he's been keeping them honest and realising that if they're going to start making mistakes, we've already seen one from Chauvetot today, he's going to be the driver who's going to capitalise on that. That's Oskari Kantanen, who is trying to make his way through and gain up on the car in front. So that's going to be an important little porter call to try and go through. The 35 Ian out there is trying to really make something happen, and there's the drive off the exit that's wanted. Thank you very much.
Shows you how critical it is to get those runs off the corners. Going onto these long straights, you're just a sitting duck if you lack the speed. Back to Reese Gardner now. Looking like he is coming up on Mafanwi Fleur. So this is not for class position. Reese still last of his class right now, it looks like. Those at least still running. And we know he had a little bit of a hiccup, but I wonder if some of this is just he's waiting for the others in his class to take a pit stop.
Yeah, I think that's where we're at here, is that these drivers are trying to think about when's the right time to make a stop. And it really is dependent here, Joe, on how long they think they can go over the course of the run. If they can go to an hour and a half, they're perfect for the one stop. But if they can go, for example, for 2 hours, run the tank dry and then put only a little bit in, then Reese is going for something of an alternative strategy where he's going out there taking the short stop early, and they are getting busy in front, and there's the turnaround in front. He tiptoes his way around both of them. Great heads up driving there by Reese Gardner to not fall over Mifanwi Fleur, who is there being turned around. The 01 machine finding out that that is not where they want to be in the flower patch, so to speak.
Well, she'll get it back on track. Looks like it was a very slow speed touch between them, so hopefully that didn't cause damage to the car. Coming up through Long Bridge, she'll just carry on as we check back in with our current leader, Ross McGregor, slamming on the brakes, coming down into the viaduct, just getting close to that little inside barrier and kicking up the dust on the way out using every inch of the track. I'd say he's hustling right now to try and make up that time to the former leader.
Look, they don't say that you can use all of the road for your road tax, but Ross McGregor's doing it anyway. I think he wants to use 100% of the road if he possibly can, and he is trying to really move. But speaking of moving over the last couple of laps, that gap was up at one point at 18 seconds over Nicholas Kirsten, and now it's down to 7.5 seconds.
On board with McGregor. As you can see, just almost looks like endless road in front of you until it doesn't. And you come up to the braking, little bit of a jink off to the right-hand side, having to get on the binders now, get the car slowed up. 90-degree corner of Tannery, just down to the inside. Counter steers as he gets back on the throttle, and off he goes. I love these onboards too, really showing you all the working dials inside the car as well. And again, going back to the old school without a radio and telemetry to help you on pit lane, you as the driver have to watch everything that's happening and keep track of those temperatures, make sure you're not overheating anything.
Yeah, and it's a lot. You're basically juggling in a car like this. You don't have the ability, so to speak, Joe, to just, drive it flat out 100% of the time. That's often what sometimes sim racing can be accused for, is building cars that work in an absolute optimum if they were in a wind tunnel, and then going out and creating them to drive in perfect conditions all the time. That's not how the real world works. You have to mitigate and manage every single little factor to the point where you look around and, yes, you've got to manage oil and you've got to measure brakes and you've got to measure all of that. You look at it from a more modern perspective, you're talking about how much energy do you have to harvest. You're talking about the likes of, well, are you doing this? Are you getting much rebate? Are you getting much over the top in terms of your revs? How's this? How's that? Try this setting. Modern cars are like driving a computer. This is like driving a feral animal.
Exactly. As Bill Zahn would say, it's like wrestling an octopus to put socks on it. You're doing a whole lot of things at once, and it's all down to you as the driver to try and manage it. So the Rafa Racing Club driver does look a little unsteady going down into the viaduct, but keeps it pointed forward, and off he goes, still about 7 seconds ahead of Kirsten just behind.
Yep, so there is definitely still time to build that gap up for McGregor, or to close it if you're Kirsten, and they're about 6 minutes away from reaching an hour and a half. And I think they might have benefited slightly as well there, Joe, from that spat of rain that we had earlier on in the race, because it would have reduced the speeds of these drivers, and because it would have reduced the speeds, it would have reduced the fuel output that they would have been putting into the car as well. So you sit down, you look at it here, that rain might just have opened up a one-stop opportunity.
I was just thinking that in 5 more minutes, you are officially in one-stop territory. And I get the sense there's a number of drivers that are looking towards that. So this could be fascinating, since we had a couple leaders look like they wanted a 2-stop. Now, technically, if there is enough fuel, they could still make it a 1-stop, but I don't think there's enough to break it up into 1/3 and 2/3, is there?
Well, this is the issue they've got, because if it's bone dry right now, will they have enough for a second stint to go exactly the same amount of distance here, Joe? So when you're looking at what you're trying to get, I think these drivers will be turning around, looking at each other, going, well, do we have enough to go and get ourselves through? And that was very much a case of drama, as in comes Gerard Rion in to make the pit stop in the 24 Belgian Turtle number 24 machine. But as we saw the slide from McGregor, your leader, I think the one thing you've got to ask is, can you do that similar sort of stint back if you've not got the rain to help you?
I think that may have actually been Kirsten that had that slide in the 10 that we were watching. We're going to see if we can confirm which that was. Neil Santowski, in the meantime, in the 36 machine, currently sitting in 14th. That is in 3rd in the S2000 class, so on the podium within class here for the Wilkes Sport number 36 car. Here we've got a replay. Let's see if we can confirm who it was.
Oh, Senkowski going for a moment there down under the viaduct, going backwards. He is a 3-time Max Bantz winner, the only 3-time Max Bantz winner, is a claim to fame. But at least at this moment, Neil Senkowski, just about gets it off the road in time. Could have very easily have been a scary accident, and a beautiful flick spin and drive away by Niels.
Wonderfully done. I didn't think you'd be able to do that in these cars, but he's got just enough power to get it whipped around like that. Prodan, who at one point, very briefly, early on, was leading this race, now sitting in 3rd, about 12 seconds off the current leader, but still owes us a pit stop. And we think that Andonovski is going to be the one to pick that lead back up when the pit cycle is through. So the Scuderia Favero car currently chasing a lapped machine, so that's not 4 position just in front of him.
Yeah. So at least at this point, you start thinking about what Andonovski can do in this race. How much time can he pull back? And how long are these drivers going to take in the stop? Because it's such a long run like this, And you're looking at how much of an advantage it is, Joe, to have that ability of the fuel in the car just to give you a little bit more grip to throw it in the corners. I think they're going to win early on with what is an undercut basically from the lead and then try and win that back later on in the race. It might also be that they're moving to a two-stop strategy and they need to build this gap up because they know how long a pit stop takes, and it takes a very brave driver to go for a longer stop strategy in a classic race like this because you just lose so much time on the lane.
Exactly. It's long pit stops here. That said, I was just trying to think about it because the drivers said that these cars are definitely quicker on the lighter fuel, which makes sense. They have a lot less weight in them. It's just that the handling goes away. So if you can manage the lighter fuel, you can be faster, and that could merit doing a two-stop where you're just doing sprints where the car is always lighter on fuel. But you have to have the skill to be able to wheel the thing.
Yeah, and it's that skill that is the important thing, because you can go out there and drive a car fast, but can you drive it safely and fast is always the caveat that's thrown about. It's okay going at 150 mile an hour. Anyone can put a brick to the floor, but here is a battle for position. This is Darren Andrews now looking to try and find his way past the car in front of him, and so for the IRSC number 39, this is an important run along the mile, hoping to get that sorted by the time he reaches that final corner, of course, which is going to be the key to getting this done. Of course, Mountford Corner is one of those where you've got to be really, really switched on to where you can make that stop and where you can get the car to the inside. And a lot of these moves you're going to see here with Quentin Chauvetot, who is there at the moment. You're going to see just how important it is to just get the car alongside. That allows you the opportunity. This isn't the sort of series where you can just throw it down the inside and hope it sticks, because that's not how these cars work.
This is for second position in the S1500, so this is a very important points pain spot. Good run there from Chauvetot to keep him at arm's length. But now we have the tricky run down the hill into the viaduct. Both of them get on the binders, tuck it nicely into the first apex, switch back to the second apex, and off they go. Now heading over to the King's Bridge. Definitely looks like a little bit of time was there gained by Andrews.
Yeah, tiny bit of time over the top of the bridge, but then hitting the brakes once again and then throwing it in once more at the Longford corner. You can see there the big door to use to sort of line up the car. You want to be on the left-hand jam, so to speak, to make sure you're in it properly. A mistake by Chauvetot now opens up the door, and it's all about drag and who's got a faster car. But it looks like car 39 doesn't have enough oomph, so to speak, to go and get that done. So despite the mistake, I think Chauvetot is going to be quite comfortable with the way it goes. But watch out, right-hand side, there's number 17 flying through. That's Verman, who's second in the S3000s, and that's the difference in terms of pace between S3000 and S1500. Double the power? Well, you can see the difference there.
Yeah, and we heard Niels talk about how it's all about carrying the momentum. Maybe that's a little bit too much momentum for Chauvetot. Has to wait to get back onto the track as he kicks up a bunch of dust, and that's enough that Andrews is now into P2.
Well, we're just getting a little bit of an update, a technical update here, and they reckon they can go about 2 hours if they want to, but it's about how much fuel do you want in the car to go out there and balance with. So it's a very fine act of what they want and how they want to go about it. You'll get some that will split the difference 50-50, but I think these drivers want to try and run the tank dry as much as they can, take a full stint, and then realise, oh, I've only got to top up 2/3 of the tank to get home.
Exactly. And well, I mean, you say they want to run it as long as they can. Again, the car gets a little bit squirrely the lighter the fuel gets. So some might want that. Some might want the car to stay heavier longer, just so that the handling is there. But regardless, if they're doing it right towards the end of the race, they should have much lighter fuel regardless. And they're going to have to deal with it at one point, some point. Meanwhile, Chauvetot, now that he's got the track advantage, is under threat from the 39, trying to fight back.
Yeah, very much wanting to try and take that place away and garner as much of an ability as possible to move forward and gain what is so absolutely brilliant. So you're looking at Konton Chauvetot. He is doing what he needs to at this moment, just about holding back behind Andrews at this point. There's a long way to go yet. It's still about priority finish the race, but if you're in front and you're more comfortable driving in front, drive in front. If you're more confident driving behind, do so. And that little flick to the inside from Darren Andrews was basically matched there by the 42 of Chauvetot. There's definitely an intent from Darren Andrews to find this move. The issue he's running into, there's no space.
9 of our 33 starters are out of this race already, and we're halfway through. But this was typical of this era where the cars often had, if anything, more mechanicals and couldn't make it to the finish, but mistakes were easy to make in them. Darren Andrews still hounding on that number 42, trying to see if he can get Chauvetot to pull off to the side. He's definitely getting some hiccups out of that green machine.
Oh, he very much is. And, you know, the last thing that these drivers are going to be hoping for in a race like this is a small hiccup here and a small hiccup there, which is going to lead to one big mistake, because you are going to get punished around here if you make a mistake. And it's one of the things about classic racing. Yes, you've got a long time between corners, but you've also got a long time between mistakes. It's very difficult when it's such a long circuit. That's why Le Mans, I think, is such a challenge. Well, open through the garden gate you go. Darren Andrews just illustrating a point. Oh, you can't reverse like that. There's cars coming around the corner and desperately trying to find a way to get through that. Oh, he's just hit the gate post, and now he's going to need to try and pull that back. Oh, that's going to buff out, I think, just about yet over the top of the berm and away and going again. Darren Andrews. Oh, that's not the best 30 seconds of his life he's had.
No, that'll be one to forget. And Chauvetot carries on into P2. Donat Prodan now in third place. And Kirsten up ahead, 11 seconds. Was that far apart before? Or am I remembering wrong? I thought it was closer than that.
Well, it might have been closer at one stage, but that gap is certainly out there and proving to be quite fluctuating. McGregor's found an extra 3 or 4 seconds in the back pocket over a bit of time, and so we are definitely seeing those gaps go through. So for Donat Prodan, he's been quite quiet over the last hour or so, I would have said here, Joe. He's just been trying to put these laps together, and at 13, 14 seconds adrift of Nicholas Kirsten, I think this is very much a case of how much can you focus as we see that. A new S1500 fastest lap in for Jerry Ferry, who is flying at this moment in time, kicking up the grass. He is really trying to take every limit he possibly can to build this margin at this point of 14.5 seconds.
Yeah, Chauvetot is the one that recently made that pass and now sets his sights on P1, but 13 to 14 seconds to make up and catch the number 43. Definitely possible with a little less than 90 minutes left on the clock. Jerry's just been plugging away as he has been in that number 43. Overall, currently sitting in 17th position.
Yeah, so that's just going to show you how much the attrition factor has played a huge part in this race. We started with over 30 cars in this race, and now we are down with your leaders in the 4th category out of 4 in 17th place. They're doing a great job. Here's Max Schreck, who is out there at the moment in the AMX racing car, really trying to pilot his way up through. He's had a very nice run. He's only 5 seconds off of right at the moment, so he's doing everything correctly that he needs to. But of course, he is still waiting for that pit stop window to come into play, where the likes of Reese Gardner is going to try and find a way back through once more over the South Esk River. It's not because it's like it's south, it is very much the River Esk, which it runs through Longford and then back up onto the power up over the top of the hill. And charging into the pits comes Martin Beyer out of the race lead of your S3000s.
So he hits his marks, starts getting the work done on the car. We'll see whether or not he swaps out Danny Foreman in the number 17, currently in second in the S3000s. Is he going to catch him and be able to overtake now that the leader has pitted in? Obviously, he's got quite a gap to go, as you can see, so he's probably going to have to hand this one back once he gets his pit stop as well.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be rather crucial to just keep in mind that these drivers are trying to throw as much as they can together. Now, in terms of where the circuit is based in Longford, I think this is going to be a little bit of importance, which would be quite good to keep in mind. So the front stretch is just a little bit out, I would say, to the east of Longford itself, so they just tiptoe into Longford, so to speak, as they go through the corner and into the town itself, and then they chase up the hill along the South Esk River and then up and over the top of that. Of course, it's a little bit different to where it is now, but there are still remnants of the circuit that can be found, and that ability to go up there and charge through the very long back stretch is still available, I do believe, in the form of what is now the Patina Road.
Yep, the only two roads that still exist from this track, unfortunately, are the Tannery Straight and the Flying Mile. Well, I guess you could say Newry Corner as well, but Long Bridge, unfortunately, does not exist, and the roads going up to it are blocked off. Same thing with Kings Bridge, and honestly, the start-finish straight has since been replaced. There is now a highway that goes along there. So a lot of change, but you can still see plenty of the remnants of what's left of this place over in Tasmania. Not a place that gets brought up a whole lot when it comes to racing, but clearly had quite an effect with this very impressive track.
So here's something of a little bit of a turnabout. So the highway that they built over the top of it just so happens to be the B52. So they've built a love shack over the top of our race circuit.
Just a little old place we can get together and have a race, I guess. As we come around once again, an hour and 21 minutes left to go. Max Schrapp here sitting in 12th overall, but fourth within the S3000 class. It's the second quickest of the classes currently, showing just how tricky it can be coming down into the viaduct corners. Definitely the most technical part of this circuit before it heads on over the bridge, over the River Esk, and then into Longford proper before you hang a right and then you leave town once again back off into the country.
Yeah, and running around the Brewery Beer Motel and charging there is Max Schrapp, who is doing a good job. Now, we've got a driver change in the 31, it looks like, potentially, as Taberzi now jumps in behind the wheel. So there is still definitely that element of push. And I'm just looking, actually, as Nicholas Kirsten got himself into trouble in second position because he's just lost second place out to Pradan. Yes, he has. And there was an orange machine there in the back that had also gone around. So big troubles for Nicholas Kirsten in your main category.
Good catch, Jake. That had slipped by me. Gerard Rion is going to make up a little bit of time here. And there is Stefano Taberzi into pit lane, trying to figure out what exactly caused that and if those two cars were related or if they just had incidents at the same place at separate times.
Well, that's the question. I think Taberzi's just come in for a pit stop. It was an orange machine that was turned around there, so I guess the best way to find out what happened would be to look from Nicholas Kirsten's perspective after he's dropped now 5 seconds, 6 seconds now behind Pradan out on circuit. Not what the doctor would have ordered, as he now jams on the brakes and looks to try and get a little bit closer as he now dives through then at the Tannery corner and now chasing back over to the river and over the long bridge, which leads up to that next little rise on the hill. That's what they're going to chase to next. So Nicholas Kirsten right now will be ruining that mistake, because at the moment you would say it's costing him potentially a podium.
In modern racing, you'd look at a 12-second gap and you think, that's nothing's going to change that very much as we get a replay. But in these cars, it ain't over till it's over. And that is the 27. Both of them go in quite hot and then struggle to prevent an accident from happening. I'm double checking to see who that is. That is Jerry Smith that had that incident with the 10.
I am so shocked that Nicholas Kirsten has not made contact with anything there. They didn't make contact as they went through. He just about kept it out of the brickwork, which would have shown a few dings and scrapes over the course of this race. That is some heads-up driving by Nicholas Kirsten, and he has got a fully clean car to continue running on. Maybe some overheated front and rear tyres is the only thing he'll have to scrabble about with over the course of this next run, but he is close to that pit window, so it's not a case that he's lost everything. He can gather back up a tiny bit of momentum, get a couple clean laps under the belt, and then decide to come in and make that stop, Joe.
And we're still missing a lot of cars that need to give us a pit stop, especially up at the front of the field. So they're willing to deal with the more squirrely cars, it seems, which makes sense to try and hold on. We got another replay of the incident in a slightly different angle. Both of them around the left flick, and the 27 unable to avoid at least a little bit of contact with the hay bales. The 10, like you said, doing an impressive job threading the needle in all of that.
It's only a small gap there through, and we'll see here with Gerard Rion, you can see that gap. It's about two car lengths that you've got to find that gap, and when you consider you're going sideways and drifting through it, you can put that down to about a minute and a half, and that's the trouble that you've got there. It's always going to be a case of, can I make it through the gap and continue my race, or can I not? And it's troublesome. Gerard Rion, who has had his own issues over the course of this race, is now trying to find himself a way to move up forward in that number 24 machine. There is the aforementioned Yuri Schmidt, who is there in the position in front of him, so that would be definitely a nice orange Dutch target to go and try and chase.
It's two cars in different classes, but for overall position, and Rion is in the faster class as well. He's in the S3000, while Yuri is in the S2000, so theoretically shouldn't have too much of a hassle getting by on one of these straights.
Yeah, I don't think he'll have too much hassle in terms of being in a straight line. He's just got to just put it all together and make it. Andonovski's out! Andonovski's out! So that was the leading car that we were expecting when the cycle was over to go and take the lead away again. The 06 is out.
It ain't over till it's over. And I can't believe that. That car looked on rails. But Timotej, unfortunately, had something go wrong. We don't know what yet, and we'll have to see if that was driver error or if there was somebody else involved in that one, or maybe something happened with the car and they had just been pushing it that little bit too hard on the revs, the engine let go. But all speculation at this stage, which means that Ross McGregor has a good opportunity to be leading this race once the pit stops are done.
Well, he is the effective race leader, and he's the actual race leader as well at this point. There's no denying it with the way that this is going. This is all about McGregor and what he wants to do, and I think we've just about caught it. I've heard my director in the ear just go, oh, that's not good, and as it gets busy down here at the final corner out on circuit, sliding on through and struggling to see the Mountford corner as a place where overtakes can happen, I think we're about to get a look.
Here it is. This is coming down into Longford, which, and now, yeah, massive hit. Parts of the car flying off. I did not expect that to be a trouble corner, and yet it has taken out multiple cars.
Well, here's the issue that Andonovski's got. He's going to be wondering why there are no hay bales at that section. The answer to that is very simple here, Joe. They got taken off by Andrews.
Exactly. Somebody took him out for you, unfortunately. It beat you to the punch, making a mistake there. Gerard Rion did get by now on the 27, excuse me. 27, though, holding on quite close to the back of him, making his life a little bit difficult. Here is that trouble corner, and both of them hoping that they manage to get through that right-hander solidly, which looks like they will.
Yep, they will both run on through and have not much trouble to deal with in that position, but a dramatic moment in this race with Timotej Andonovski finding the tree there at Longford corner, which has been quite dramatic in the context of this race. It means everybody will gain a position at some point as they all look to pilot around. The likes of Maddie Shepherd, for example, is going to be one of those drivers who will pilot her way up into the top 10 with Andonovski's retirement.
So coming up around through the viaduct once again, Maddie Shepherd still sitting in second. Matt Wright, who she's chasing up in front. And both Matt and Reese Antipodeans here competing on not quite home soil, but still hoping to do themselves proud down under. But Ross McGregor going to try and do that Rafa Racing Club proud as well, leading the overall race.
Yeah, and that's what he's going to be hoping to do there in the 05 with 1 hour, 12 minutes and a half remaining here in this opening round of racing action here with Carrera Mundial and here with Genisus Extreme. This has been a wonderful charge that we've been seeing here at Longford to get things sorted out. McGregor 30 seconds almost to the good over Prodan. We've just had the dramatic news that the car that was effectively leading the first stage of this race, Timotej Andonovski, has put it around a tree and is out of the race because of that issue. So that was a trouble that we had a little bit earlier on. We focus now over to Matt Wright in the 9th place here, the number 32 machine, who will just about be in the next few moments leapfrogging into that 8th place overall and seeing about 15 seconds down the road the likes of Salmonen in play, as we do have a car pulling off to the right hand side and looking like about to take some pits, and that is going to be a very important pit stop then for car number 17, which will be Danny Fuhrman, who is looking now to get himself in and make a good stop out there at the moment. Dutch is a difficult language to pronounce, by the way, so we do appreciate the fact that the V sometimes is an F and sometimes there's a difference when you've got different lettering in different places. We're all learning at the same time as Ross McGregor continues on his charge right now and realizes that he's got a little bit of a buffer to play with, and sometimes we see that buffers do intend to allow that ability to go out and say life is a little bit easier, I can take it easy, I don't need to be so aggressive, I can dial back from 100% down to 99, 98, 97% sometimes that ability goes. But ultimately here I think sometimes we do see how important racing like this can be. When you've got a lead like this, how do you protect it?
Exactly. He needs to try and bring this one home from here. He's been handed the lead, much like we saw for the 6 car. And we thought for sure they can just kind of cruise this one home. But easier said than done. Maybe the tires are starting to feel it. The brakes are likely starting to feel it. The grip should be there, as the track has been rubbered in pretty well and definitely has dried up to this stage, at least online. It's definitely dried up, and the drivers have gotten rid of whatever moisture they've had, with the sun having been out for some time now. So it is in the hands of Ross McGregor. It's his race to lose.
It very much is, and there is a driver change, and it'll be Lorenzo Van Erven who gets behind the wheel of the number 17 machine. So Van Erven, to bring this one home, is going to need there a lot of ability to now make up the time over the course of this race. So focus very much set forward, and how much you can chase. Drop down now to 7th position, trying to get much more out of it. And there is Chauvetot out of the pit, who has decided not to change drivers.
So he's going to do this one solo with an hour left to go. Definitely easily doable. To give you an idea of how far ahead the 6 car was, we're currently seeing it still scored 11th overall. Now, some of that is because of, the other classes, and now it's actually just moved down to 13th. But the other classes, of course, being lesser on power. But man, just amazing how much of a gap they had built and how hard they had been pushing in this race, that they're still very high up our timing sheets almost 10 minutes later.
Yeah, so 10 minutes, it really shows you the difference in class, and you sort of have to blink and go, really, 10 minutes around here? That's the equivalent of about being 5 laps down over the course of this race. And it doesn't look like on paper, when you see some of these battles going on, that it looks really anything more than, say, you're losing a couple tenths of a second a corner, but you look at it from that perspective, well, you're racing for about 3 hours, a couple of tenths of a second a corner, it's really going to add up over the course of a lap.
It does. Jason Field here sitting in 24th is actually, I believe, our last car still running right now. Currently in, I think, about 6th or 7th in class. He's 7 laps down, so he's ran into some trouble here today. But again, as we keep saying, it's an endurance race, and just being able to keep going is a big part of the battle. And he's in 24th, whereas if everybody else was still running, if he was the last car out there, he'd be 33rd instead. So it makes a difference.
It makes a huge difference here for Jason Field, and the way that he can now leapfrog up the order and gain a little bit more. It looks a lot more respectable to say, hey, I was close to a top 20 instead of, hey, I was close to a top 30. How many were there in the field? So at the moment, if he can get himself up, he's getting closer and closer to a top half finish. And of course, naturally with endurance style racing, the longer that you build the gaps open, the more likely it is going to be that there are less accidents available on the board. And speaking of those drivers who look like they had everything on the board, I'm just wondering what they're going to have to do before Dundrod comes along.
Mafanwi having to dip and dive a little bit here, trying to position herself, and brakes hard and unable to make the pass on the 22. Stays patient now, heading under the viaduct. This is the battle with Max Schrapp. This is for overall position, but not for class position. She has a lot of catch up to play to get to the next one, which is Laurie Solomon, and up in 6th overall. She's now 12th overall. Many seconds. In fact, I think a couple laps up to the next car.
Yeah, so it's going to be a long way for Fleur to make her way back up there. There's the kick of dirt that goes along there on the outskirts of the circuit, jumping up over the railway, which doesn't provide too much drama out there. Watch out for the marshal who stood in the middle of the field. I hope that they do jump back out of the way if there is an incident that would happen along this stretch of road. But you're really looking for braking markers here, because you've got this lovely bit of housing here on the outskirts, and you've got this small kink right, which does often provide that natural run. And I would say this corner here, the Tannery corner, Joe, would you say that this is basically a Molzan style corner?
It does seem like it, with one of the longer straights, and it's got that little kink off to the right that'll interrupt your braking. That's a good comparison right there. But we saw the extra power that Fleur had underneath her right foot, and Schrapp couldn't really do much to fight it in the end, although he is trying to come back and almost gets into the rear of her car. Fleur gets it going. Now she should be able to run away, that she's hit the flying mile, and the extra oomph should pull her away from that car, and the battle doesn't have to carry on. Next on her list, Maddie Shepard, again not within her class.
Yep, so Matty Shepard, this is just a case of running through the numbers at the moment, getting back to a place of consistency here, Joe, and being with cars that are more akin to your class. It is very difficult sometimes when you get caught down in the classes a little bit, because ultimately they do have every single right to fight you for position if they think that overall is something they want to go for. So you sit down, you look at that on paper and you go, well, I can't really complain. They are technically battling for a position, but it's not necessarily the done thing.
Somebody goes off down at Mountford. That is the 29. So that's Jason Fields with another issue. Car that's still running last right now, but he's still running.
And Kirsten's in.
Back on.
So Nikki Kirsten is in the pits, and this is important because this is going to set the chain reaction off in terms of how long Kirsten's stop is by the time that Nikki can leave the pit. So if Nicholas Kirsten, if he can get a good pit stop here, he might put a little bit of pressure on the other two to decide, right, we've got to go now, because some of the drivers behind us have already made that call to jump into the pits.
And we did hear that 2 hours is around the maximum time. Now, this may be extended because of the rain opening up the fuel window slightly with a slower pace. So McGregor carries on. The question is, how long can that number 05 car manage to do so? It's definitely wiggling its way through the narrow, long bridge. So let's see whether or not we get an answer this time. We'll be to the pit entry within just a few moments here.
Yeah, we certainly will. And of course, that flying mile is known because you are going really fast along that section. And Ross McGregor now building up to half a minute's lead over Pradhan at this point. So you're looking at what Ross McGregor's been able to do. He's just been quiet about the way he needs to go. He had the pace earlier, had to run through the pack essentially in the first 15 to 20 minutes to get up to where he wanted to be. But outside of that, it was a case of, right, now we've got to get the focus in because we can't catch the car in front and we've got to try and pull away from the cars behind, which did happen and did work. And I think that you look at what Ross McGregor's been able to put on the table, I would say this has been a very successful sim race by him so far, and he thought about diving down into the pits, but he'll go one more.
So not responding this time around. Of course, wasn't looking to be challenged by the undercut seriously, but we wondered how much fuel do the cars have to try and get as long as they can. As you can see them squirming on the brakes coming down to Mountford. Watching Pradhan, our second place driver, that gives you an idea of how far behind those 30 seconds or so are from McGregor as we watched him down this straight quite a few moments ago. But he's also got this lap traffic in front of him, and that can play a factor in it as well.
It really can, and that lap traffic is pretty much the be-all and end-all when you get to this stage of the race, because you pick them up in dribs and drabs. You don't pick them up as, oh, I'll have one car here and then I'll have a train of 5. You know, you got one car here, one car there. You never quite know what they're going to be doing, what to be expecting. You get a general gist of the race. You get like a racing sense of where cars are going to go, drivers are going to go through various experience and who you can attack and who you can't. And that's pretty much, I think, where these drivers are at now. They've got an understanding and a basis of what everyone's going to do. So now they're going to use that to their advantage on the brakes into the town once again, and now looking to exit with a little bit of pace.
Getting that foot on the throttle, unleashing the power of that 8 car and heading on his way. Kirsten, having stopped, sits in second, but is a full minute and some change behind. Bergier is actually a lap down. Yeah, only 3 cars on the lead lap. Remember, this is a 4.5 mile track. It's a long, long track. The fact that we're down to 3 cars on the lead lap is kind of amazing.
Yeah, what has to be remembered is this is about half a kilometre longer than the longest functional race circuit that's not called the Nürburgring or Le Mans, and that is, of course, the circuit known as Spa-Francorchamps in its modern variation. So you sit down and realise, well, how long is this circuit? Yeah, it's a pretty long one. If you're going to be down a lap, it's 2.5 to 3 minutes to put a lap together on the board. So for the likes of Pradhan, for example, if he's making a decision, he's got 3 minutes to think about what he wants to do to respond to what has been going on. And you look around it there, there's the ticker, 1 hour remaining, and you've got to get an eye out on what this is like. A new Spa, old Spa, 20 kilometres long. Completely different challenge in terms of how you put that together on the board. But here, I would say for the time, this would have been feeling a little bit like a sprint circuit. Now we go, oh, it's a monster.
Yeah, exactly. We've definitely been a bit spoiled by almost the standardization, you could say, of racetracks and the expected length, or at least range of the length that they tend to be these days. Donut really using every inch of the track right up to the edge and into the dirt as he slides off of there. But this used to be more common. Races like this, tracks like this, many of them street circuits covering many miles. Bergier is coming in and definitely having trouble getting the car slowed up as it squirmed on the brakes, but finds his stall and now takes his service.
I'm sure he'll be looking at that signage thinking I would like a set of Dunlap tyres to put on my car right now, and I could do with a bit of Albert's Cough mixture as well to make sure that I get myself through. Oh, a little bit of slide there for the 42 going by. I love all the work and the dedication that goes to building this series up, because it's not just about the cars that are out there racing and the balance of performance that those cars have. It's also down to the fact that you've got to try and build this circuit from the ground up, and that's no mean feat, and that's what R Factor 2 I think has done very well over the years. It's that pliability to race just about what you want where you want.
Exactly. A lot of fans in the sim world have used it to great effect, making a lot of these mods, and it seems to be its strength. And I love that this is what they've given us with it. Certainly looks beautiful. We have to remember this is not something that comes with R Factor 2. Fans built this track that you're looking at, and it looks gorgeous.
Oh, it looks absolutely stunning. There's no doubt about that, especially with a bit of sunshine over the circuit here in Tasmania, where, of course, we had a little bit of rain earlier on, which put a cat amongst the pigeons. Martin Beyer not in currently a 26-minute pit stop at this moment in time. He is very much out there and flying about this circuit in 5th position. And after just the one spin that he's had over through this race, he's done really well after his pit stop to build the margin he's got over Reece Gardner. He's got pretty much about a lap to play with at this point.
And Van Erven is the one currently running second behind him. And Matt Wright just pitted, so that's our leader from the S2000s. So I wonder if Maddie Shepherd's going to be swapping around with him, or is she falling a little bit too far back? There you go. It's Matt Wright getting service done in the 32. Again, that's our leader in the S2000 class.
Yep, so just getting that service, and we'll hopefully be off and away again. There's Maddie Shepherd by comparison. Now, I'm not sure how in the 1950s they get something like this. How far does the Goodyear blimp fly?
Pretty far, apparently, all the way to Tasmania. That or they've got a very advanced helicopter from that era that is flying around and giving them some beautiful shots. Or maybe we've just gone vintage racing and we've got all kinds of modern cameras that have been able to get these wonderful shots on old cars, as Maddie Shepherd is indeed going to catch and pass, at least temporarily, on Matt Wright.
Yep, so that will just, and I mean just there, because you can see the British Racing Green Lotus-style colours that are there for Matt Wright, and he very much in the 32 SDG 6 SGA finds himself about, I would say, 4 seconds back. It's going to be about 5 by the time they hit the brakes. So for Matt Wright, target, and a very visible one in front as well, which sometimes can be helpful, sometimes can be a hindrance to drivers as they look to get themselves going. And remember, because they've been idling for so long in the pits, getting the fuel in, it does take them a little while to get the oil temperatures back up again, Joe.
Yeah, that's a good thought as well. Need to try and get everything working optimum. And for those wondering, well, the car will not work at its best. It will not have the most speed if you don't get all the temperatures right out there. That's tires, that's oil, that's engine temperature, water temperatures as well for the radiator. So you've got to do a lot of management, just like in today. The drivers back then are all temperature management specialists trying to get the car working as good as possible. So the 32 is not our leader, but we'll likely get this back once we get Maddie Shepherd in. Already 2 hours and 5 minutes into this race, still waiting on a lot of cars who must have been sipping fuel.
Oh yeah, they have been. And I think that's been quite the case. And often you find it in series like this, Joe. Those who are the fastest drivers just so happen to be the best at saving fuel. And now it's no coincidence when that happens, because a lot of people go, oh, well, he's got it all. He can go longer than me. He can drive faster than me. What am I doing wrong? The answer is they're a lot smoother on the throttle and brake inputs, to the point where they're not really burning that fuel as much as you, driving the extra 5 meters around the circuit per lap. So not only are they doing less distance by taking more optimal lines, they're also being more economical as they go in, as Maddie Shepherd illustrates that perfectly by taking the wide line there going through Newry Corner.
Just adding a couple extra feet to the race there, unfortunately, in the Vulcan, but kept it away from that tree root that's on the outside of that corner. We've got a replay real quickly. Maddie had more problems potentially, and down into Longford. Ooh, and
Stop off for a beer.
yeah, the parking is unfortunately full, so she turns around and off she goes.
Showed a displeasure there by giving the tap to the building. I'm sure a few bricks crumbled off in the meantime, Joe.
Well, that means Matt Wright is back up to the lead since she handed that one back over, and she at least is able to keep going without too much damage on the car. With an hour left to go, a little bit less than an hour left to go. We're still waiting for McGregor and Prodan to take their pit stops. I believe Salmonen still needs to give us a pit stop, Van Erven as well. Speaking of Salmonen, we got a battle for class position between himself and Bergier.
Yeah, so that is going to be for position. And when you sit down and look at it, Owen Bergier a full lap down on Nicholas Kirsten at this point, but fighting back as they head towards the brakes, but it's about how you use them. Look at how Bergier has to get a lot heavier on the brakes to move back to the inside, sailing with a much calmer braking motion. There was Salmonen, and able to take that fourth position away, and look at the difference off of the exit, just having to go out there and really try and make that move happen. So difference maker is a second by the time they get back on the power again.
Yeah, it's the little things that add up in racing. You always wonder, how is that person managing to go that much faster than me? It's not just the smoothness like you mentioned, but it's just minuscule things that add up over time, either over a lap, over parts of the corner, over the entirety of the race. And that's why you see those drivers seem to just have something that you don't. They figured out where to find those tiny little margins that have been left over and can give it that much more speed. Bergier close behind Salmonen, not close enough to strike quite yet. Oh, that is hot into Longford. He avoids the trees like many others have, but he's got to be very careful as that corner apparently bites.
Yeah, this is very much a case of you've got to try and avoid the trees, and you could call this as well, the run up to Tannery Corner, a mini Molzane, because they used to have those trees, of course, on the outside of Tetra Rouge Corner. It's not quite as fast here at Longford, but it's still very much a case of the similarities applying. But yeah, you've got to be so careful on the outside. That is a race wrecker for one small mistake. Any overcorrection, any over application of the throttle, and pretty much your day donezo.
Don't miss the corner for the trees, but we watch Darren Andrews now, sitting here in 19th. This is for position with Chavito for second in class. Chavito was fighting with Ferry. Oh, no, he was fighting with Andrews. This is who he was with before. So these two actually have not separated that much.
No, they really haven't. Of course, Ferry was able to make a little bit of a gap. So for Jerry Ferry, he's doing exactly what he needs to do. But Darren Andrews, who of course took all the hay bales away for the problems of Timotej Andronovsky, you're now getting the sense that Darren is trying to get himself back through and up into that second position, as in comes Shepard to make a stop.
All right, so she was already in second place. She should stay in second in S2000. Askari Kantonen a long ways back. I think she will be able to emerge ahead of him. Lafon Fleur here. Let's see. She's still in sixth in class, it looks like, currently. Down here in the S3000 Plus class. Not close enough to try and threaten Bergier. We mentioned earlier she's lost a couple laps, unfortunately. Wonder if maybe she made a visit to pit lane to take some repairs, because I believe we did see her have a few issues here and there making contact with some walls.
Yeah, she did, and because of that, you sit down and you look at, well, okay, well, how much have we lost, and how much are we going to gain back? Of course, you can get the panel beater out, so to say, and try and put it back into shape as much as they can. Obviously, I find that the best way to deal with it with machinery like this, Joe, is to get a hot kettle and a plunger, and I think it works a treat when you can just pull it back out with a little bit of thermodynamics.
That's a good way to do it. I've seen a lot of people use that. By the way, Ross McGregor down to a 2:36.3 on the fastest lap of the race. next nearest car, I think, is Donut Prodan with a 237.646. I don't see any of our DNF cars closer than that. That's a pretty darn big gap. Ross has been really schooling everybody.
Yeah, absolutely has been, and to a very strong margin on top of that. So this has been well concocted over the course of this race, just putting the laps in, building that margin. Remember how Donat Pradhan was the pole sitter effectively in this race, was up there at the front, wasn't necessarily having too many troubles out there. And when you sit down and you look at it, wow, what more can you do? What more can you say? This has been a tough race for him where it's just been natural race pace, which has fallen away from him. And that's why he is over half a minute down on your race leader and would have been at this stage about a minute and a half down on the likes of Andronovsky once he came in and made a stop. So there's Gerard Rion hoping to get through and does so. So that's now 16th position. And we are really seeing here now that it is about survival. That's what all endurance races are at the crux. It's finish first and then worry about your position.
Your pace is your pace, and you can't try and overdrive the car. Now, strategy will play into it somewhat, but over the length of it, you should kind of finish where you finish as long as you don't make mistakes. Rion definitely having the 43, looking not only like he wants by, he is going by now through Newry.
Yeah, but now you've got the entire run, of course, of the flying mile, and when you've not got the pace underneath the bonnet, well, you can just fly away if you're the 24 Belgian Turtle car. So that pretty much tells you all you need to know, that they are able to really charge away and get what they want out of it. Gerard Rion, clearly with more power, doesn't have to worry so much about that car behind. And, well, there'll be another one that'll be flying through right now. That is the 17th place Jerry Ferry Neves Racing Machine that finds its pass through. And so that 43, I think, is really showing what pace is all about. Getting that sorted, getting that gap built, and really it's been a case of everyone else, how do you stop him? He has been a steamboat out there in front, let alone a ferry.
Jerry Ferry looking very unstoppable with this race, with Chaviteau behind him by about 10 seconds. In endurance terms, that is a somewhat small gap. 46 minutes left to go, but he's going to have to hustle if he wants to try and close in that number 42. Keep an eye on that gap and see whether or not that does come down. And of course, lap traffic can often play a part of that. We've seen it's taken some skill with some of these lapped cars to try and manage them and pass them without losing too much time in places.
Well, it works both ways. It's not just a case of how much time do you lose as the faster car passing the slower car. It's how much time do you lose as the slower car trying to pass the faster car. That's also something that you've got to keep in mind. Whoa, who's that? Tyre gone down there at the viaduct. That's Gerard Rion. We just saw him go through.
That is definitely day over. Yep. And just as we go to him, takes a tow into pit lane. Our latest DNF now down to 22 cars left because of that. Andonovsky being the most recent before that we lost in this race. It's really picking them off. I thought this would be a race of attrition. I figured, these are difficult cars. This is an unforgiving track that eventually we'd start to see some fall by the wayside. But there have been a few more than I anticipated that just could not handle it.
Look, forgiveness in racing terms is a 21st century idea, I think, Joe. Not here, not in these cars, not on this track, not in any way, shape or form. And Ross McGregor, I think, has been saying, well, this circuit needs to beg forgiveness for the way I've been driving it at this moment at the front. But the viaduct has been the corner that's been catching most of these drivers out because it's got everything that an old car doesn't want. Downhill, a brake and turn at the same time. So effectively a trail brake as you then get the car and try and settle it into a slow left and right, where you very much want to put the power down as early as possible on the exit, which means that it's very easy for you to lose it on entry, in the middle of the corner, and on the exit as well.
Yeah, that viaduct and Longford corner have taken away, I'd say, the majority of our cars in this race that have DNF'd. And is Ross finally pitting? This looks to me like Ross is pitting in, and we don't expect him to lose the lead after the stops, but we see whether or not Prodan will use this time to carry on and try to lead a lap, or if he's going to follow suit.
Well, I tell you what, going 2 hours, 16 minutes and 4 seconds at full pace in the race lead pretty much is a sign that you have played the fuel game very well. And if Prodan finds a way to go out even further than that, that's quite impressive. Now, just take note on how that car is put into the pits by Prodan. We've seen a lot of cars being straight, by McGregor, as Prodan will go another lap. What? But you get the sense that that is very much a case of I'm going to put that car, nose it in. That's going to be very difficult for McGregor to get back out again, and he'll need that time with Kirsten, depending on how long he stays in the box.
Yeah, hopefully he can still steer it back out, get it going without having to put it into reverse, but I don't think he'll lose 30 seconds worth. At least we anticipate that to be the case, as Donut now takes the lead away. Kirsten's already stopped. What?
He did. He just reversed out the pits there, Joe.
Oh, okay. So he is going to cost himself just a little bit of time. Now, the drivers were given a bit of a heads up that some of the pit stalls might have sort of awkward pits like that. Oh, Chavito. Uh-oh. This was second place in class.
I hope
Not
he hasn't.
anymore.
Well, no, I hope he hasn't clobbered one of those steel picket wooden fence posts which they've got down there at that section of track. I think he might have got away with it there, but for Conton Chavito, not what he was hoping for. He was in second position. He was challenging along with Andrews, only 10 seconds off of the class lead, and goodbye with 40 minutes to go. And it's one small mistake that will undo everything.
Yeah, so that hands it over to Andrews easily for that P2. Chavito still in third, thanks to Mark Johnson not being close enough to capitalize on it. But Jerry Ferry runs away even farther now from the pair of them after they had been fighting earlier on. Laurie Salmonen versus Nikki Kirsten. What is the... Oh, they are pretty much together there, I think that looked like. Is that correct, or are they a lap apart?
I think there might be a lap apart here out there because, of course, Nicholas Kirsten is there 1 lap adrift at this moment. So you get the sense that, okay, 1 lap, that's a lot of time to try and make up in 41 minutes worth of racing. It's not impossible, but I would say it's very improbable. Look at the slide from the 17 of Van Erven moving through at Longford corner. That could have very easily have been a race ender there. And when you're dealing with these cars, the style of the time is very much front rear is the way that these cars are built. You put rear front, FR. So you got the engine in the front, you've got all of the drive going through the rear wheels, and you've got a car that very much likes to slide.
The math real quick. I think it's about 16 laps left. So let's take a look at a replay in the meantime on what put Chavito in that position. We've seen that a lot, taking in too much speed, hits it so hard that it bounces in the 39. Where are you going?
It's a slow descent down, and maybe he's found a trail to get back up. And he will. Oh, this genius there. He has somehow found survival once again. The Bear Grylls of this series. He has done so well to get there and get that sorted. Wow, what a recovery that was, and some quick thinking.
Yeah, a little lucky, but also very clever in the heat of the moment. That was critical because that gave him second place. If he wound up hitting something, then, P2 probably out of the window there, and then it gets handed over to Mark Johnson as we look at Ross McGregor once again. Prodan pits, I think.
He
has pitted. Okay.
And so parity is restored in this field where Ross McGregor leads. But the question is, will Kirsten take second position away from Prodan? And I reckon that just might be the case, and it will be the case. Look at that. So for Prodan, it's the final spot on the podium, and no sign of leaving, only now just leaving. So the chase is on.
Checking to see how much time Ross may have lost with the backup, and I don't think it was that much. Maybe a second or two, honestly. So I think that worked out okay for McGregor. Obviously, I mean, with 30 seconds, we knew it wasn't really going to be that dramatic, but you don't want to lose any time possible because you never know what can happen, especially if he has a spin or something in this final little bit of the race. The 8 back out on track. Donat Prodan does emerge behind Kirsten. So Kirsten now takes over second.
Yep, and sole control with 13 seconds in the back pocket. And there is Adam Komorowski in the 40 Blinker car out there, the T44, hoping that that very nice sky blue machine is going to try and gain a little bit of an extra place out there on circuit. So he will get one off of Rion, so that's just about to happen in the next couple of moments with that 21 car completely out of contention. But you're getting a real sense that up and down the order, the quiet drives that have gone pretty much untalked about. So we haven't really talked about Ho or Kantanen. Both of those two drivers, I think, haven't really had too much to speak about. Neither has really Mark Johnson in the 41 Briggs Art car. So he's done a very good job there. Top 20 performance out there, you'd say tip your cap.
Absolutely. Mark Johnson now running in 4th in class, as mentioned. I also like that that Briggs Art car looks like it's been shocked by something that's appalling in front of it, just based on that grille. But looks aside, it's been a quick enough car for him. And he is also running 20th. I think we've only got 2 cars behind him, Komorowski and Jason Fields, but they are in the slowest class, so it's to be expected.
Yeah, of course, that very much, don't quite know what's happening here face there on the front of the car, and you see it quite a bit. It's the classic shape that is there of some of the older 30s and 40s machines, and sometimes does pivot over into the 50s as well. There is Stefano Taberzi out there at the moment in the Cavalcanti car. They're in the 5th position in class in the S2000s, which hasn't really got too much love. Right over a minute clear of Oskari Kantanen then, and you've got to look at Ho in 3rd position, Senkowski in 4th. It's been very gapped here, this group that we've seen right now in the S2000s, and sometimes you do get classes that just obliterate themselves to lefts and rights. For example, 160 seconds almost the lead gap for Bayer in the S3000s.
To be fair, we've lost the different classes pretty evenly. I think the only one we haven't lost anybody from is the S1500s. But we've got 3 gone from the S2000s. We've got 4 gone from the S3000s plus. Oh, I take that back. Is Celadon back out on track?
Might do, if there's enough repair time that's gone through as we focused on Ted Ho at this moment. So if there's a case where a car has just jumped back up onto circuit, it's not impossible, but I'd say it's quite improbable. They'd have been working through there. So we can confirm that Celadon has got the DNF attached to it, and that will be day done. No chance of getting back out on circuit.
Yeah, and to finish the point, 3 of the S3000s also are out of this race. So really the slowest of the classes, while you might have to carry the momentum, seems to be helping them prevent the car from going off the circuit and into the weeds too hard and ending your race prematurely. Ted Ho, haven't really talked about this 34 a whole lot, at least not when Ted has been in the car. Runs 13th, currently on the podium in the S2000s, but the bad news for him, 51 seconds off of Kantanen. So he's kind of on his lonesome at this point. It's just get the laps in, finish up the race, and collect our points.
Yeah, that's pretty much where you're at here. If you've got no real chance of catching the car in front, no real chance of being caught by the car behind, it's just dial it in, bring it home. It's a Sunday drive on a Saturday afternoon, so to speak. So just relax, enjoy the same scenery that you've seen for the last 2.5 hours, and enjoy it for 30 minutes more.
30 minutes and a little bit of change at the least. And this might look like a simple track from above, but today we have discovered just how complicated it can be trying to race around here in these older cars that did actually compete on this circuit. With Ross McGregor, our overall leader, only 3 cars still on the lead lap out of anybody running here today in 2.5 hours completed. It's very much spread out at this stage. Actually looking to see what our closest fights are. I think it is between Berger and Bayer, which are in 2 different classes, but that'd be 5th and 6th overall.
Yep, so those two will pretty much say that cross-class is the battle. There is Oskari Kantonen, who has been doing a really good job, 12th overall in this race, and definitely putting together a wonderful showcase of driving here to get those consistent points. And remember, they will have points by class as well, so even though that they're very far behind, so to speak, against some of their other competitors out there, they'll still be only having a minimal loss. Oh, that's a stop. Oh, we don't often see that. Why are you stopped in the middle of the road? What's happened to Oskari Kantonen? What's going on? Van Erven's in trouble, potentially.
And that smacks of a hardware issue of some sort. Car comes to a halt and then tows into pit lane.
Officially out. Oskari Kantonen, right as we were singing his praises, is out of the race, and it looked like nothing. It looked like absolutely nothing. It might have been just as simple as the load bearing of a brake just snapping, for example. There, it feels more hardware than software.
Ted Ho will get promoted up into second in class, and Neil Santowski will find himself on the podium. We'll need a little bit as they have to cycle back around for the lost laps. So another look at Canton. I'm trying to see if we can see any smoke or anything. Engine still sounds like it's going.
And then it just doesn't. Sits down, idles, hits the handbrake. No accelerator pedal, it looks like. And, well, if you can't get up the hill, then that's it for Oskari Kantonen, out of the race. And, oh, that does, you know, sting when you've put 2.5 hours worth of time into it only to get a nothing off at the end. You know, it sticks in the craw, and that's why sim racing can be a little bit brutal sometimes, but all you got to do is get back on the horse and go over to the next one at Dundrod.
Sometimes it's just not your day. Racing can just as easily be full of celebration as it is misery. And Nicholas Kirsten trying to make celebrations of a podium finish hopefully today, with about a 10-second lead over Prodan. Trying to see if I can figure out what their lap times are looking like in comparison. They're actually looking extremely close considering the length of this lap in terms of pace. So Donat could still catch up, but needs to get a hurry on.
Yeah, so there is that case of you need to find some time and you need to find it quick here, but Nicholas Kirsten, I think, has been keeping Prodan at an arm's reach at this moment. This traffic here, of course, of Jerry Ferry is not going to be too helpful at the moment. Ferry has every responsibility to hold his line and to make sure it's not difficult. There's the blue flag being waved by the marshal. Through goes the number 10 machine over the South Esk River for the first time. They'll cross back over the South Esk River up at the top end of the circuit, and now looking to try and get things through. And we're hearing that it's a crash for Oskari Kantonen there, and he just all decided that it didn't want to play ball, and all of the grass being kicked up. You might find half a piece of road down there, the amount they've been running wide at Longford Corner.
Yeah, it might be buried under there. Just to clarify, that is a software crash. We should explain for Kantonen. So didn't actually crash out on the circuit, but Kirsten showing why Nikki has managed to make up this much of a gap using as much as possible. Yeah, it's always about trying to extend the circuit as wide as possible, opening up these corners, carrying the speed, and getting the throttle down as soon as you can. So that's why you see them going all the way out to the dust and kicking it up, knowing they can get away with that little bit of a flick.
So change of car again. Danny Furman is once more back into the car, and so because of that, you sit, you look, and you say for car 17 that this is going to be a case of a real charge to get back anything. 8th place they're stuck at currently, and it looked like for what they've got, a bunch of screen freezes for Lorenzo Van Erven. That would not have been ideal. Needing to make an emergency switch back into a driver. Danny Furman would not have been expecting to drive an extra half an hour to 40 minutes in this race.
And I mean, thankfully he was there and available, because sometimes there are other obligations, things that you have to go do that once your stint is done, you got to go be with the family, go take care of chores, go to work, and various things like that. But Danny was mercifully still around, is able to pick it up, and he seems up to the task.
he certainly does. It will be a case of just trying to consolidate what's there. It's a lap to the next car, which I think, 22 seconds over to the next car. So there's going to be a lot of work to do to pull that back by the end of the race. But at least right now, you would have to say that this has been the sort of race where any sort of inconsistency out there, any small little issue that is out there for these drivers is the last thing that they're going to be hoping for. So when they sit down and go, you know what, we've only got this much time left to go, we've got to really motor. Now, this is interesting here as Yuri Schmidt in the Hammer Racing 27 closes in on what I believe is Jerry Ferry.
Yeah, so that's getting close to the lead of S1500, but it's not for position as Schmidt races in the S2000 class, but for overall spots, yeah, this is to decide 15th. By the way, Donats just set back-to-back personal best laps and has did cut it down a bit ago. Now it looks like it may have gone back up, but I do think the 8 car is picking it up, trying to see if there is anything in it to get that P2.
Look, if you're going to lose the brakes, you might as well lose them late. You've got to use everything that's at the disposal to get yourself a little bit quicker out there on circuit. So I think that's where you sit. If you're Prodan, you've got nothing left to lose. You've got a lap over to 3rd position. Why not go out there and charge? And here's the difference in car class out there as there goes Yuri Schmidt officially inside the top 15, making the pass done on Jerry Ferry, who didn't really have too much to argue with there.
No, he knew that wasn't his fight, so just allowed him through. And Schmidt now looks forward to try and catch DeBerzi almost a minute up the road, which seems unlikely at this stage. Maybe a little bit too much opposite lock there for Ferry coming off the corner, but nothing he can't handle at this stage. One thing we should note, because some of you may have been seeing some of the cars in the background and things such as that, this is, even though these are the 1953 cars, this is the 67 version of the Longford track. So it's maybe slightly out of era, but you'd have to have a keen eye to really, I think, be able to tell.
Well, I think the biggest giveaway there, Joe, is that when you're going through the viaduct, on the right-hand side of the viaduct, there's a big bit of graffiti that says 1967 on it.
I did notice that as well. But yeah, it's I'm sure this was put together to try and be set up for some of the Formula One cars or Formula cars at the very least. They did have Grand Prix here, not necessarily World Championship Grand Prix, but all kinds of spectacular drivers from the era for the 50s on into the 60s racing at this track. Martin Beyer, our leader in the S3000, and I'm seeing an entire lap over Reese Gardner, if I'm reading this timing and scoring correctly.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful drive by Martin Beyer. He's been up there with Bergier all race long. We saw him in the early stages getting a little bit held up, and even though that Bergier is in a 3000 plus and you got Beyer in a 3000, it's really been a case for Martin Beyer that he's been sat there head and shoulders above the field, and he's only had one bit of concern over the course of this race that he's had to really worry about, and outside of it, I think he's just driven absolutely fantastically, and he hasn't really put a foot wrong throughout the entirety of this performance. It has been just a masterclass of how to drive as the second category vehicle. It's like almost seeing a podium out of an LMP2, for example.
Exactly. It's been fantastic out of him, the pace that he's been running. And it's coming down the hill now, looking for the brake markers as he has many times prior. He'll get on the binders, but we can start to tell that the lower fuel levels in these cars is affecting a few of the drivers. Martin having to do a little bit more handiwork to try and save it a few times.
Yeah, he's having to get a little bit more animated with the steering wheel. He's got to do a few more corrections out there as he goes through, and it's a slippery road actually when you get to the end of a race like this, and you're starting to have to make all of these corrections. You see cars in front getting themselves caught up in a little bit of trouble. That's very much where Martin Beyer puts himself in at this point, up over the top of the railway and now charging over towards the Tannery corner. You get the real sense that with Martin Beyer's steering, he's only going to have to do more and more as this race goes on, and that's what he's trying to battle against. I don't want to do too much counter steering, so either I've got to dial it back or I've got to go out there and be more aggressive and generate more grip.
I'm sure that the brakes are just crying to end this race, though, such as this situation where Beyer goes off. Remember, he has a huge gap over Gardner, so he's in a good spot here, and that was a smart decision. Instead of trying to make the corner, he just headed it through the gate.
I think Ollie Behrman needs a few lessons here from Martin Beyer. That was a very early decision to bail out of the corner, seeing the garden gate wide open and very much just diving on through it and realising, right, I can find reverse, I can get back going again, and I can then charge on in the later stages of this race. So ultimately a decision that will cost him some time, but it will cost him a lot less than not having a car at all.
Back around through Newry corner for Matt Wright, your leader in the S2000s, with also, I believe, a full lap over Neil Santowski, or no, excuse me, Ted Ho, who has been chasing him and his number 34 machine. So Matt's really got this one in his hands firmly. And we haven't seen a perfect race from him. We saw a couple little mistakes here and there, but minor ones in comparison to what other drivers have experienced. And Matt frequently races in these older cars. He often competed over in the Grand Prix Legends series, over on iRacing as well. And we saw him in the Trans Am series here for the HRSC. So Matt has experience and knows how to handle all these older cars and all the idiosyncrasies that come with them.
Look, he's got a brand and he sticks to it. He loves the classics, and I don't blame him for loving the classics out here with the racing that we've got going on. Matt Wright has been putting together a very nice and astute race. It's not been flashy, it's not been flamboyant, it's not been, hey, look at me leading. It's been quiet, it's been under the table. It's been one of those races that you say, you know what, you don't need to focus on me, you can focus on someone else. And that's been that style which he's been doing so well, and is only 4 seconds away from Fleur out there on circuit, which is now gapped down to 3.5. So very much riding the coattails of the car in front, which I believe will be Andrews, and we'll be certainly hoping for a way past Darren Andrews very shortly to now go chase on for maybe 9th position overall.
Mighty impressive, because Fleur is in S3000 plus cars. So that's 2 classes up that he's racing against Mafon there. She's going to have quite the advantage in terms of straight line speed, but it seems that Matt Wright is just making up with it in overall pace. And you asked, how many of these drivers would have practiced at this track. I feel like Reese Gardner and Matt Wright definitely are among those I would expect have probably driven this one before, based on both their preferences and types of racing, and both of them being Australian.
Yeah, well, you've got a type, and of course if it's a classic circuit based in your home country, then naturally you're going to have an affinity to it. You're going to practice that little bit harder because you want to get a result on effectively virtual home soil, which I think we worked out once upon a time was an extra 0.2 of a second's advantage.
At least according to one former champion. But Stefano Taberzi here sitting in 14th position is about 12 seconds behind Santowski, who is on the podium in the S2000s. This is not for class position with the car behind, though. Yuri Schmidt about 53 seconds back, so don't worry about that 10 of Nikki Kirsten just making an easy pass by. We're starting to run out of time, though, so those drivers that do maybe have a whiff of a chance of trying to run down those in front of them have really got to push. And that's what Prodan has been doing. He is now down to 7.7 seconds behind Nikki, which might be too little too late, but definitely too little to catch Ross McGregor, who is our leader.
Yeah, so if you can catch McGregor, that would be great, but I think we're looking at a little bit too far away. 22 seconds is a long way. Although that gap is down from about 30 seconds as it was previously, it's still going to need Ross McGregor to run into mistakes, and I think that Ross is dialing this one back, realising that he can lose a second a minute and still hold this race by about 3 seconds, and when you've been really putting in the laps, so you're talking about 2 seconds a lap here that you'd have to lose in terms of time, and I think McGregor feels and realizes that even if I drive at 80%, I'm not sure I can lose 2 seconds a lap.
What's that old Senna pitfall? You gotta race at least close to your limit, or else if you relax too much, that's when you make those mistakes. So McGregor, I don't know that we'll see him completely let up, but yeah, I imagine the pace will not be lightning quick in this Rafa Racing Club machine. So crosses the line once again to add another lap to his tally with 21 seconds over Nicky Kirsten, who is also picking up the pace. I just noticed that Kirsten with a personal best lap last time. Let's see what this one is as the Lambda car gets ready to cross the line. 37.250 last time, and this time is 37.620. So no, not another improvement, but still looks like the 10 car is trying to respond to Donat.
Yeah, so Donat Pradhan has got the gap down at 8 seconds here with 18 minutes to go, and it is very nervy when you see a gap tumbling. It's a psychological effort that goes through as you try and get that time and you get it sorted. You think, where on earth can I be losing a second over the course of this lap? It's only a couple of braking zones, and then you'll see it on the relatives as you go around the circuit. Oh, there's 2 tenths there, oh, there's 3 tenths there, and sometimes that can give the incentive. There's a little bit of a hold up through Longford corner. That'll be another bit of time that's lost there through behind the number 36 machine of Neil Senkowski. For Nicholas Kirsten, you can be very easy to fall into the trap of, oh, well, I know I'm 2 tenths of a second slower there, so I can attack it in a little bit more, and then go too aggressive and lose the car entirely.
Yep. Need to just race within your limits. Sometimes easier said than done as well, because remember, you're focusing for a long time here, and if you get into this rhythm as we ride on board with Jerry Ferry, who leads our S1500 class, I know my problem often, Jake, is that it's, well, I want to go faster, I want to catch that car ahead, but you can't overdrive the car. You gotta stay within your limits and just kind of think big picture.
I think Jerry Ferry's got an advantage that everyone else doesn't have, and that's the fact that he's got a rear view mirror.
That's true, which, if I remember right, that's kind of something that started to become a little more common around this time. Was actually invented at Indianapolis, believe it or not. Indy 500 saw the first invention of the rear view mirror, but not as common as you would think, because up to this stage, up until I'd say the late 30s, early 40s, there were a lot of ride-along mechanics in these cars.
Absolutely, and of course, if you run into a problem, well, your mechanic's there alongside you and can quickly fix it, jump back in and get on again. Of course, the only issue with that, Joe, is the fact that you've got to take about a 60 to 80 kilogram weight penalty every single lap.
Exactly, and those who eventually were able to abandon that, or did finally choose to abandon that, definitely found an advantage on that one. And that's the thing that maybe that's what, we find so fascinating, so neat about these older eras of racing, is the advancement of technology. Things were being explored. They didn't know what's possible. We're still exploring it now, but we've got it all down to such a science. Whereas here, they didn't have computers. They didn't have telemetry. All that they knew was the driver feel and the lap time. That's all they could tell you.
The rule book, because everyone's a rules lawyer.
Yeah. That's for sure. And they definitely had their own rules in amongst these eras. It still wasn't a completely rung what you brung, but although it was a fair bit more wide open than what we see. Hence why we tended to see more cars that were shaped and were identifiably different from one another. But yeah, I never tire of seeing and then just imagining being on the cutting edge back in this stage, knowing that you are among some of the fastest cars in the world, some of the fastest sports cars, I should say in this case, that you're out there racing and at the top of the line.
You got to consider as well, actually, how much effort there was in what was the beginning of globalization as well in a series like this. It wasn't so commonplace to have an international field of drivers at your beck and call. It's a case of where you got to fund drivers to go out there and to go and race, and that's why often that you find in national championships, if you go through the 50s, the 60s, to an extent the 70s as well, you get that look of, well, okay, the only reason we're seeing this being dominated by nationalities because we just simply put don't have those drivers, and it's in all sports, who go out there and can basically dominate by being an international superstar. I think that the first time we've really got to see it in a motorsport sense was Juan Manuel Fangio, who would have been a whisper in the wind for a lot of drivers when he came along to Germany in the mid-1930s. But when you sit down and when he was in Italy and when he had that ability to go out there and race, I think you really got the sense of we're onto something here. This could be a global championship where anybody can enter so long as they have that ability and dream to do so. It's lost a little bit of that way now because it's become a finance package, what you see. But that's why I love sim racing so much, because it does harken back to that, oh, well, every series, anybody can participate so long as you don't put a fee into it. And a big slide by Donat Prodan getting all the style points done, trying to avoid the tyres down there. And he's pulled that gap down to 5.5 seconds.
If you needed any evidence that he's pushing, has decreased the fastest lap down to a 2:36.3, does not repeat that this time. So maybe a little bit of a loss through that final corner. 5 seconds, as you said, between Prodan and Kirsten. And surely Nicholas Kirsten is, if he's got any sort of timing and scoring up, is seeing that gap coming down, knowing that the 10 car has got to hurry, has got to try and make sure that doesn't give this up at the very end. Should have about 5 or 6 laps to go, I think. So it'd have to be a second per lap. So it's coming down to it. But, you know, traffic and mistakes could do it.
Well, he's passed Furman without too much of a worry out there, so he's got that through. Had to slightly compromise the line, of course, running through at Longford corner, but he's got these long straights that he can go out there and now and really put the rubber down on the road, and he might be reliant on Kirsten having a bit more brake fade than him just to give him more advantage. They'll be monitoring how they've been driving, how much they've been using those brakes, and it really is a case of, well, how much are you able to attack and how much are you able to defend? It is that sort of game of cat and mouse that we've got, and I think Prodan is gaining everything that he needs through the corners. He is attacking, and look at that traffic in front for Nicky Kirsten.
There's your class leaders up on the top of the screen, as well as on the tower, the top few in each of your classes. Prodan not giving up the ghost this late in the race, still trying to hurry around. This is part of a championship, but you always want to try and do everything you can in each race to finish as high as you can. And Prodan willing to risk it, especially, I think, knowing that Salminen is a full lap behind him. So there's little to lose here in taking a few risks.
No, absolutely not. So when you get to that last lap, it will be the sort of case here, Joe, where it's, right, all guns blazing, you know you can't be beaten along this race. You got third locked up. So that's where Donat Prodan, I think, is sitting here. He's sitting on, right, I've got to push, I've got to chase, I've got to get to that white car in front of me. And he really has a good sense of how do I have to chase it. Look at it, 3.5 seconds through the corner. It'll be about 4 to maybe 4.5 by the time he crosses the line. But he is scything that gap down late.
This has given us some real tension at the end of this race. I'm checking to see what that last lap was for him, and I think that was a little slower because of the traffic. It looks like, yeah, 2:37. But the good news for him, 1.6 seconds faster that last lap than the 10 car.
And more traffic in front. Oh, and a lot of smoke kicked up. You can tell that the margins are fine by Kirsten, because you don't want to be taking up grass on the inside of Viaduct Corner, because you'll be jumping up the viaduct and you'll be very liable to rolling the car if you're not too careful. He's got through who he needs to out there with the traffic, and now it's a case of, do you have to sit and wait here at Longford corner? The answer to that's going to be yes, because that's the number 39 car that's there in front in the 1500 category. And so for Darren Andrews, he just about gets out of the way, and for Nicholas Kirsten, he's going to build a little bit of a gap. You can see Pradhan, left-hand side of your screen, Kirsten on the right looking back, and he's got that rear view mirror that says, you know what, I'm going to look back and I'm going to see that I want to see a little red dot, and I want it to stay a little red dot.
This is Lam de Lupi versus the Scuderia Favero. The Favero Veen, the mimic of the old Ferraris. Definitely a fearsome company to race against back in this era. Kirsten knows that as long as he keeps that car on the track and keeps his pace up, it's going to be difficult. It's going to come down right to the end for Prodhan to have to try and pass. And with them being at least an equal class machinery, that's a big slide. That's going to be a loss of time for Donat.
Well, he had to do everything to gather the car back up again, and Donat Pradhan, right now, you can sense that he's pushing, but Nicholas Kirsten has just got to keep the car on terra firma, and he'll be all right. He'll be nice and dandy. It is Pradhan's prerogative to go and chase this gap down if he wants to make this happen, but he doesn't want to sacrifice a third-place finish and the points that are there. Nicholas Kirsten doing what he needs to do, and it's not the quickest, it's not the flashiest, it's not the stylish, but it is enough out there, and he does have to get on the brakes, and he's got to get on them way early here for the traffic going through the final corner. This is a huge ball back to Pradhan as he will now run through the corner. Now he goes.
It has been an ebb and a flow. It was down to 3-some seconds, and it went back up to 4.5 with the mistake that we saw from the 08. Now it's back down to 4 once again as the 10 has to stay patient with that lap traffic. Kirsten hurries along down the road to try and extend it once again over Prodhan. It's ducking under 4 seconds, just barely between them, while Donat tries every trick in the book he knows to find speed.
He knows how to find speed, and I think he'll very much have any notifications off at this point. He'll be, don't at me, bro. I've got to really try and get this chase down and gain these places. Kirsten getting a little bit fortunate there with some of the 1500 traffic moving out of the way before Longford corner, diving down in, squirreling into the corner, missing the apex, sliding it out of the corner, just about gathering it up. And I think everyone had heads in hands at that point in time, thinking, oh no, Nicky Kirsten, not like this.
Not at Longford. We don't need another car wrapped around that tree. That's cut it down to 3.3 seconds now between them. Donat assuredly saw that little bit of a slip up the road. He knows that he's getting mistakes out of that number 10 car. He's keeping the pressure on as hard as possible.
He really is, and he is having to go through the traffic and really be pick and choose as he's gone through. He's navigated that fine. Now he's got to go back on the offensive. Look at it, 2.8 as he goes through the apex. This is Nicky Kirsten now in a frantic bit of panic because he'll have about 3 laps, I think, to try and get himself through. And all the while, look at the times that they're all doing at the front. They pulled the gap to your race leader under 20 seconds. That's just proving how fast they're going to have to go to keep on each other at bay.
Yeah, I mean, those brakes and every little other part of the car that's being worn out, they're using it up, knowing they've got just a few laps that they need them for, while McGregor can just cruise to victory in front of them. 2.5 seconds between P2 and P3. They hit Mountford corner once again and onto the main straight. Last lap was a personal best for Kirsten. Probably not going to be the case this lap with that big slide coming down through Longford. There we see Prodhan giving chase.
He's trying so desperately to get in, but the car on the outside there, the 43 of Jerry Ferry, is not going to be helpful in this one. Look at how that gap comes in, and it's the perfect toe for Prodan. He can now use that as a slingshot on this straight. 2.6 seconds with 5.5 minutes to go. The race for second position continuing to bring its gap down, continuing to close. And Donat Prodan, who had been dropping time all race long, has now found himself energized in this race, sees the target in front, and I think we're going to have a race on our hands by the time we hit the brakes with just one lap to go. But for the moment through the viaduct, he is really ragging the red Scuderia Favero around.
He was 1.7 seconds faster that last lap. It is huge swings and roundabouts now between these two. Which one will blink first is the big question. We've already seen mistakes from both of them.
Would that be Fleur who was there off the road on the left-hand side? That would have put a lot of concern there, Joe, into those drivers. They would have seen the yellow flag, they would have seen the sideways car, and they would have hoped that it wouldn't have pulled off and away. It didn't, and so they continue on. And now this is where traffic becomes key, because you can get past one, but can you get past two? And look at the road. It's chock-a-block in front of him.
Not much place to go. I would not suggest trying 3 wide around this track. Gets one, maybe gets the other. He wants to be by the time they get to the turn, and it is going to compromise things slightly. And then there's the 34 up ahead. Oh, what was that?
I think he took a tap. He took a tap, so I think it was Wright he was trying to get by, and Wright had the speed through the corner, and I think he took a tap on the exit.
Interesting. Definitely looked like contact. Oh, and the 34 caught at the absolute worst moment. He's going to give him a little nudge now. I need to get through, says Donat Prodan. He's going to be able to do so, but this has cost him. It is a much slower lap for the 8 car.
Yeah, that was Ted Ho, who is now officially a lap down on Wright, who has just made the move to make that happen. Is there any damage to the front now of Donat Prodan's Favero at this point? Because if there is, he's going to be running at a disadvantage. Nicholas Kirsten getting a big amount of luck, and it might just be enough to keep him at bay. There's Ross McGregor. Keep an eye out on the lap times, because I think we're just going to get 2 laps to go.
Indeed we will, with about 3 minutes left on the clock, and the leaders doing 2:36s out there. Although I say that, Ross McGregor, last lap a 2:40, and then this one was a 2:39. Yeah, I'd say he's backed off.
Yeah, I don't doubt him for a second that he's tried to back this off, but if it's 2 laps for Prodan, and it's about 3 seconds as they cross the line, then you really have to sit and say, what does Prodan want? 1.6 seconds a lap. What's he been doing all race? 1.6 seconds faster. But that, Joe, is 1.6 seconds faster without tow. What will he do with?
And when it doesn't have the traffic as well, that's the big thing. It's been such a headache for them at the end of this race. Martin Beyer, who leads in the S3000s, I mean, not only doesn't have rivals around him chasing him, he doesn't have anybody. There's no lapped cars. There's nothing.
It's a Sunday drive on a Saturday. I think Martin Beyer realizes that he has built a buffer zone of his own, and it's a risk-free style of racing that he's running. And look at him. He is dominant.
I mean, I'm looking at our little ticker with the marching ants to see how far apart he is from everybody. He's got what looks like a third of a lap on either side of him before you finally get some other cars. And then Matt Wright in the S2000s outperforming. I mean, he's going to beat an S3000 Plus and an S3000 car on pace.
That just goes to show you how quick Matt Wright's been driving. He's put a lap on the rest of his S2000 field, and it's a step-up moment for everybody else in this category who know that they have got to jump up to a higher level when Matt Wright is driving at this level. And then you've got Jerry Ferry, who's got half a minute in the back pocket because, of course, Chauventot and Andrews had a big moment down at the viaduct about half an hour ago, 45 minutes ago, which put basically Chauventot's race on notice, and Andrews had to go on a wild excursion.
Yep, and that handed him that P2, but has not handed it back with Chauventot about 14 seconds behind. So what's happened up here? 2.3 seconds. Kirsten keeping Prodan too far away, at least for now. But what's going to happen as they approach some of this lap traffic in front of them?
Well, they'll catch that on the last lap, and there'll be questions. McGregor going through the final corner, looking to start his final lap of the race here, Joe, and he will do so with about half a minute to spare, so they'll have to go one lap along, which is not what Nicky Kirsten was hoping for. He'll now have to navigate that traffic on the final lap of the race. Look at it, how close it is. He's going to really have to get on the blower and say, this has got to go down to 1.8 there, down at that corner there. It is really tight for Pradhan. He might have a half chance if he throws it in on the last lap down there at the final corner.
The 8 is going to have to be perfect. And now look at that with the cars swapping position in front of them. Is this going to hurt Kirsten? Is time going to be lost? Or can Nicky try and sneak through? Surely he's going to have to try. He is. He'll get to the inside. Can he whoa up the car is the question. The 27 just decides to bail on the corner.
Yeah, he goes straight into the tyres, slide off the exit from Kirsten. Look at what it's done by Gap. There is Yuri Schmidt, who's 5th in class. He'll be able to continue going and finish his lap. But this is huge right now in terms of this race, because it's about this corner. And again, there's going to be troubles when they hit the brakes and go through, because again, there's going to be compromise needed by Nicholas Kirsten. This is the last lap from hell right now here in Tassie. And right now, you've got a Tasmanian devil behind in Pradhan, who is going to be at 1.5 seconds, doing all he can to close that margin once more.
And gaining, he got a better run coming down Tannery Straight. Remember, Flying Mile is the last straightaway and the longest. If he gets another one of those, maybe a move is on into the final corner, but it's going to take whether or not he can get by the 25 here, and it looks like traffic giveth and traffic taketh. He's going to be compromised.
He is, but crucially, he got down the corner, a little bit of contact as he goes through, and he's got to be very careful out there. I wonder if he's got a little bit of steering damage out there. Look at how they're throwing it through the corner, taking all the grass then at the long bridge, and now they'll know at Newry Corner who's got what, and I think Pradhan's in range. No, he's not! Big slide and goodbye race!
Oh, he was giving it his all, and I have to give him credit. He was not going to leave anything on the table, unfortunately. It slipped off that table, maybe going a little bit too hard there, coming into some of the last turns. But the last turn for Ross McGregor as he hits the brakes coming down into Mountford Corner. It fell into his lap a little bit when our leader wrecked out. But you got to be there. You got to be in it to win it. And for Ross McGregor, it is going to be victory in round 1 of the Carrera Mundial.
Simply put, dominant from Ross McGregor. You could not write an easier day for him, and the hold here from Nicholas Kirsten is one where he'll have a huge sigh of relief. A mistake at Newry Corner confirms his 2nd place.
Rodan going to round out that podium. Where is Beyer? Beyer's got a ways to go, trying to figure out who our next car is. I think maybe Matt Wright's our next leader that we're looking for here, along with Jerry Ferry relatively close to them. There is Matt Wright coming around. Victory to start the season off from the S2000 class in this number 32 car. Just a brilliant job for the Australian.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. Lights flash there from Matt Wright. A big commitment at this time of morning and a big victory in the back pocket. Jerry Ferry will also come to the line, and he has walked away from the field just by sheer attrition. It was a no-mistake style race from Jerry Ferry, and I think for everyone else it was very scary for them in terms of what he's been able to do. Jerry Ferry to the line takes the S1500s.
Half a minute lead over the next nearest rival as well. Let's see, Danny in the number 17 here coming around. This is for podium in S3000. And Beyer, is he that far in front of him?
Well, you get a look, and where Martin Beyer is, he's climbing up the hill here, and he's only just jumping up onto the straight. So this is a long lap of honour here for Martin Beyer. Gardner had already reached the line, so I think with just the way that it's gone, he'll get effectively 2 laps.
Yeah, I think you're right. This is going to be the last of our leaders to take victory, and I think second to last car, I believe Mifan Fleur might be the only other one trying to complete the race here. Just got to take it easy into the last turn. No need to end up with a binned car right at the end of the race. He'll slam on the brakes. Don't need them anymore after this. As ahead, another driver creeping around that final corner. And a glorious sight for the 23. The checkered flag and a win here in Tasmania.
Well, Martin Beyer doing everything he possibly could here today to show what he was capable of. It looked close in the opening phase of the race, but once the pit stop cycle came in, that was pretty much that. But there's your overall winner, Ross McGregor, who did take advantage of a little bit of misfortune, but you make your own luck in a race like this, and McGregor had to fight his way through the field in the early stages of the race, Joe, and thoroughly deserved this victory with the way that he put together 3 hours.
Really a brilliant job, that is for sure. As he'll get to celebrate here, lighting the tires up coming out of the final turn and swerving the car in celebration there, coming down into the pits, surely grinning from ear to ear. So that wraps up our race. Here are your unofficial results for this one. Ross McGregor taking the victory, with Nicholas Kirsten coming home in second place. And hopefully we'll get these up on the screen. Prodan is in third, with Salmonen coming home in fourth, and Erwin Bergier finishing P5. There's your S3000 plus class. Then your winner, Martin Beyer, in the S3000s, finishes sixth overall. Reese Gardner was seventh, and Danny Vorman was P8. Mafan Fleur was ninth, and then you get your S2000 winner, Matt Wright, finishing 10th overall. Max Schrapp was P11, and Ted Ho was P12. Neil Santowski, 13th today. Stefano Taberzi, P14, and Yuri Schmidt, P15. Jerry Ferry, 16th overall, but winner in our S1500 class. Darren Andrews going to wind up in 17th. As Quentin Chaviteau, P18, Mark Johnson, 19th, and Jason Field, 20th. Last car to finish was Jason Field, as only 20 vehicles managed to make the end of this race. Looks like we might get to chat with Ross, see how he felt after that one, if he felt like that was as easy as Jake described it. Because, Ross, you weren't leading the first part of the race, but once the leader handed it over and the pit stops were done, it looked like you had a pretty handy gap that you kind of managed to the end.
Yeah, I was quite shocked to have such a gap, to be honest, because as usual, I qualified terribly. I don't know, I just don't know how, like, Devon and is it Danny? I don't know how they can be like 2 seconds faster. Like, I could not find that pace, so I just gave up and started fourth. But in the race, fortunately, I had better race pace, and I binned it on lap 1, which was, not ideal. And then I had a bit of work to do to kind of make my way forward. So I managed to get back up to P2 eventually. But Devon had built up like a 30-second gap by this point. And then he pitted early, which I was quite surprised about, but also delighted at the same time, because it meant I had a chance still of winning the race. So I think his co-driver must have DNF'd at some point. So yeah, I came out after the pit stop and had a nice little gap, and then just kind of brought it home at the end. Although Nicholas was closed in a little bit, but it was more because I was like taking my time around back markers and stuff, just making sure, because Longford can bite back pretty bad.
Well, Longford Corner itself specifically bought a lot of drivers, and so did the viaduct. That was where we saw the vast majority of our accidents today. Were you given any extra special care through those turns or anywhere else in this track, just to make sure?
Basically, any braking zone as a minefield. But yeah, at the viaduct, I had at least one moment where a car was like sideways in front of me. So I don't know how I managed to avoid it, but I just grabbed the clutch and just stopped the car kind of spinning and just managed to squeeze past. So, but I think everyone's had like 2 or 3 of those moments during the race. It's just a case of like minimizing them and, planning ahead. When you see a yellow flag and you can't see too far ahead, then just, back off and just take it steady.
Well, Steady gave you the victory here today, so can you repeat this when we go off to Dundrod?
I think it'll be Yerney that's taken over for Dundrod. So, like, he's much faster than I am, so I think he'll be fine. So, but fingers crossed we can keep these results going for Rafa Racing Club.
Well, we look forward to seeing you try and do it when you do get back, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Up next, we've got our winner in the S3000 class, and Jake has caught up with Martin Beyer.
I have, Martin. That was a very clinical performance from you. There was no doubts in terms of who was going to win that, but at least in the early parts, there was a slight scare for you down at the final corner. Talk us through what happened.
I cannot even remember the one at the final corner because there were so many other things. So it was far from clinical, and I was struggling so much in the rain. The thing that I remember the most is I collected Stefano Tiburzi, big sorry, in the braking zone during lapping into the end of the back straight. The speed difference was so insanely huge there. I thought I would brake earlier than I did in the other laps, but I collected him. Both continued. I hope I saw he finished still in fourth in class. But still, you don't want to hit anybody. Also had a few other excursions where I missed my braking point, so it was far from clinical, and I think Reese really would have been up for a fight today if he didn't have this one major incident. I don't know what it was, but he was in the pits for 2 laps or something. Else he was super consistent from what I saw. So yeah, I was struggling a bit. But in the end, it was good enough today. I had the car advantage. I had disc brakes, 2 seconds a lap quicker in the dry. So this goes to the car.
So nothing to complain then about this race. Lovely job for you, Martin. I just want to touch on what makes this championship so good. You've got such a wonderful wealth of different cars and categories and drivers who are all there, all wanting to try and put their best foot forward in a championship like this. What is the appeal for you when you get into these classic cars in sim racing and along with this series here? What is it that gives you that itch to go and compete in HRSC?
Well, the cars obviously are a challenge at the tracks as well, and the one thing that one big mistake or one small mistake can cost you everything. But mostly it's also the people. So the best time actually is the time before the race, when we talk about how things will be going, strategy, just have fun on Discord. So that's actually the most important thing here.
Yeah. That's going to be certainly something that I think is rather huge in the context. And moving forward, you are a championship leader. You are heading to Dundrod, which is your next round of the championship. So for Dundrod, is it just going to be a case of same as you managed to perform here today, or are you looking at finding a little bit of things to tune up with?
Actually, I will miss Dundrod. I will be on vacation. It's my favorite track, but I heard there might be rain, so I'm not that sad. We'll see. I will miss it. Reese will probably have a good time there. We'll see.
Well, apparently, we have found out that Martin Beyer is allergic to rain, ladies and gentlemen. The floor is yours, though. Anybody you'd like to thank? It's a category victory here today around this Longford circuit.
Yeah, basically everybody on track who was very attentive and got out of the way wherever possible. So it felt safe most of the time. So thanks to everybody for having an open eye.
Martin Beyer there joining us, taking the category class of S3000 quite comfortably by the end of racing completion there, Joe. And I believe you've had the opportunity to walk down the paddock and find another driver that we get the chance to talk to.
Indeed, Maddie sharing the car here with Ted Ho, finished second in S2000. Maddie, congratulations on the podium today. Sharing the car, we didn't see everybody do that. Do you feel like that helped out? Because it did look like it was tough to have to focus on driving these cars for 3 full hours.
Yeah, we didn't really have any game plan with when I was going to swap over, so I think Ted wasn't as confident in the car, but I had damage, so it was basically when the fuel ran out, we just decided to swap over at that point, and expecting a much longer pit stop, but it wasn't that long in the end, so we were okay.
So kicking things off with a podium, does this kind of set expectations for you? Do you feel like heading off into the remaining 4 rounds, you can repeat this feat?
I hope so. Coming into this race, we were just hoping for a top 5, so we were pretty happy with second overall in class. It was a big shame, but I think Cantonen had a PC crash. He was very quick. But yeah, Dundrod should be fun. We're looking forward to that a lot, but I think it should be a 5-hour race, so it might be a bit exhausting.
Yeah, I was going to say it's very much at odds with this track, which is a bunch of corners just with a straight line connecting them. That one is very, very technical looking. So do you feel like you can adapt well going from here to there?
It depends. We don't really have an understanding of the car yet. We spent about 3 hours last night just throwing stuff at it, just trying to figure out the setup, what works, what doesn't. We got a big improvement, but it was a bit dodgy coming in today. So we'll probably need a good few sort of practice sessions before next round in 2 weeks. I'd say. We'll see.
Well, again, congratulations on a podium to you and Ted, and hopefully we'll get to chat with you more when we head off to Belfast.
All right, thank you.
So, Maddie and then Ted Ho finishing in P2 in the S2000s. And checking to see who we have up next here, Jake. I'm not sure if you've managed to track down if we got another driver to talk to.
I'm not sure is the answer I've got, Joe, but it was a fantastic showcase of driving, and one which I think that when we've had great racing like this, quite simply put, bring on the next round.
I agree. I definitely agree. And we're going to come back in just a little bit of time. So definitely make sure and tune in. If you're like us, you got to love these vintage cars. We got a fantastic race, 3 hours in time, and we still didn't know how it was going to wind up all the way down to the last lap. You can't ask for more. Well, a big thank you, of course, to the HRSC for bringing us on for coverage of this series. And also thank you to the team here today, Jake and Daniel. Make sure and check out our social media as well as our website and our merchandise store so you don't miss a moment. And as we mentioned, we're heading off to Dundrod for the next one. That'll be Saturday, September 28th at the I believe at the same time, 11 a.m. or 10:30 a.m. Eastern. But be sure to check out our other broadcasts. And until next time, race clean, race hard, and we'll see you on the track.